Nicholson 1968. Welcome to my new project, Cain Tubal Cain. Gonna discuss a lot of good information in this video, connect some dots as always. Things that we're going to discuss: John Dee, advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, Mind Gamers, a movie coming out 2017, Enochian language, D-Wave, James Bond connection, of course Tubal Cain, and CERN. This video will show you, with many different aspects that are in front of us, where the secret societies, the Freemasons, Illuminati, Skull and Bones, where they are getting their information and where this technology is coming from on the face of this earth. It is not from the minds of men. It is minds from the fallen. So, without further ado, welcome to Nicholson 1968's Cain Tubal Cain.
The name is Bond, James Bond.
What you just saw there was a photo shoot from a movie that came out in 2009, Angels and Demons, with Tom Hanks. It was shot there at the facility of CERN, there in Switzerland. And what I want to establish here is, most of you probably know this, but for those who are going to see my work for the first time, I want to establish a couple of quick things before we move on into this video. First, we're going to address CERN and what the Director of Research in Scientific Computing there, Sergio Bertolucci, says in his own words. And it's very important what he says. The Large Hadron Collider could open a doorway to an extra dimension, and out of this door might come something, or we might send something through. So there you have it in his own words. It is no accident that Angels and Demons was done at a photo shoot here at this facility, because that's what's going on. Is they are trying to communicate with angels and demons, things that Solomon knew, things that have been in the past that were destroyed, and that they are trying to build back this technology and bring it back that was destroyed in the days of Noah of old. The other company I'm going to talk about now, and I'm going to play the quote, is D-Wave and what it's about, and in their own words telling you again what they're trying to do. I'll play the clip now from one of the founders.
So you may have heard this word, quantum computing. It's often, people have the misconception that it's some kind of newfangled supercomputer. It's decidedly not that. Quantum computers allow us to access hidden features of nature, new dimensions, and if we can access these sort of hidden dimensions at scale, we could have unimaginable computing power.
So there you have it. Two companies that are backed with billions and billions of dollars, D-Wave and CERN, both attempting to delve into dimensions, the hidden realms around us, things that are put in place for a reason, for safety, our safety, humanity's safety. Next, I'm going to play a clip that is a behind-the-scenes clip of Angels and Demons from the director himself, Ron Howard. And listen very carefully to what he says. And then I'm going to connect a dot to show you what they're attempting to do is nothing new. It's been tried many, many times. And I will connect the dots for you on that. Enjoy this clip. I'll be right back.
For centuries, science has been trying to understand on a literal basis so many aspects of our world, including the moment of creation.
Take your places, people.
Atlas and CNS.
Currently at CERN, particle physicists are conducting experiments hoping to recreate the Big Bang. They're hoping to understand how our universe came into being.
So you heard it from his own mouth, Ron Howard, the director. What CERN is attempting to do is to learn the universal language of creation. They're trying to back engineer how we were created and try to understand that. Instead of turning to a creator or a God, they believe in the Big Bang. So what I'm going to show you now is a video put out by CERN. And everybody's seen this that has followed the conspiracy behind CERN. We are happy at CERN. But I want to show you something that nobody has touched on that I know of. And even myself. During this video they were putting out, they were dancing, it's been decoded, all of that. But also in the middle of this video there's a gentleman who is holding a sign, and I'm going to show it here, Bond 1 and Mandela. Now, whether you believe in the Mandela effect or if you even know what that is, there's plenty of things out there on the internet about Mandela effect. But what I want to state to you here is, even myself, the Bond 1, I was looking for the James Bond connection. The first one, the movie James Bond. The first one is Casino Royale, with Barry Nelson, thus the last name Nelson Mandela. But it goes deeper than that. To throw you off here, here's the connection. Bond 1, the first Bond, and what the James Bond movies are based on is none other than John Dee. That's right, the advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. He was a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, occult philosopher. He dove into alchemy, divination, Hermetic philosophy. Also very interesting, this is why I'm saying this is the connection. In his last 30 years of his life, he was attempting to commune with the angels in order to learn universal language of creation and bring about the pre-apocalyptic unity of mankind. In other words, just like the study of Shiva, when you dive into the deity of Shiva, where the serpent is eating itself, snake eating itself, the same thing is going on. Bring about destruction of mankind and start over. Bring about another Big Bang destruction and start over. It's all the same thing, just told different ways, is what they believe in. This is what's going on at CERN and D-Wave. For those who have seen Lucifer Through the Looking Glass, my project, Alice is a code word for Lucifer, and that's why I named it. Instead of Alice Through the Looking Glass, it is Lucifer Through the Looking Glass, of what is being attempted and what is going on here. Notice that one of the detectors is called Alice of CERN. So it's no accident. So you start connecting more and more dots of what is really going on. John Dee was the first James Bond. One of the reasons he came up with the idea of 007 is, of course, you've heard the story of John Dee signing the letters, the important information to Queen Elizabeth I, 007. And for centuries, I guess people have assumed that that's the 00 and a 7. But back in the day, nobility and royalty, especially Queen Elizabeth I, they used to wear lorgnettes. And those are eyeglasses with a handle, which is 00 and then the handle meaning 7. And what that was stating was, when John Dee would sign that on the paperwork that was sent in the communications, it was for her eyes only. for the Queen, for her eyes only. And even James Bond movie, there's a James Bond movie for your eyes only. So that's what it was. It wasn't necessarily a 7. It was 00 and then the lorgnette emblem. So that's what that means. And there's other things that are associated with that play into that. From Facebook, you've got, it looks like 2 balls and a cane, 2-ball cane, which comes from that. The Facebook, which we all know, they're spying on us. They use Facebook. We freely give information to Facebook when we open it up. That's why they call it a profile. It's a profile on you, and you share what you eat, everything. There's no telling what people share on Facebook. I just share information. I don't share my personal information on there. But anyway, Facebook used as spying, which also James Bond, spying, the connection. James Bond is a spy for the Queen of Great Britain. It's all connected, all symbolism mixed with reality that is going on now in the 2017. So you see the connections there. Also in Freemasonry, the first reference to 2-ball cane in Freemasonry is found in the Legend of the Craft, where he's called the founder of Smithcraft. Tubal Cain was a master of forging weapons, in which 33rd degree Freemasonry and Master Rosicrucian. Manly P. Hall, this is what he says. This is about him and his weapons. The Mason must follow in the footsteps of his forefather Tubal Cain, who, with the mighty strength of a war god, hammer his sword into a plowshare. Tubal Cain is the password given in the 3rd degree of Blue Lodge of Master Mason. So, I mean, it's all through Masonry. We know NASA is covered with Freemasons. We shouldn't believe anything they're telling you, because it's all illusion, leading you astray to believe in aliens, whatever you want to say. That's a whole nother video. In the Bible, this is, Tubal Cain is described in the Bible under Isaiah 2:4. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. And also in Joel 3:10, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weakly say, I am strong. For these reasons, Tubal Cain has been consecrated among Masons of the present day as an ancient brother. His introduction of the arts of civilization having given the first value to property. Tubal Cain has been considered among Masons as a symbol of worldly possessions. Let me repeat that. Tubal Cain has been considered among Masons as a symbol of worldly possessions. So what that is telling you right there, for all you Masons out there that claim you're Christians, here's what Christ says about worldly possessions. Matthew 6:19-21. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through or nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So there you have it. Freemasonry disguised as some kind of Christianity. And they're really a brotherhood that secretly communicate amongst themselves to protect the brotherhood, per se.
Me and Joe were talking about the legal system. See, I'm suing the guy that ripped me off for this stuff.
Joe, do you have any experience in a court of law?
1987, Joe Gorelli is arrested on a drunken disorderly. Case dismissed. 1989, again, drunk and disorderly. Case dismissed.
Besides, Jimmy's case is in the bag, because we know something that the other side doesn't.
That all federal, state, and local judges are members of a certain obscure sect of the Freemasons.
Now, hold on. Our strategy is that all judges are Masons?
Well, there's more to it than that.
Like what?
Well, there's a secret Masonic word which, when uttered, obligates judges to rule in your favor.
Wait a minute. You're basing my whole case on some silly secret word?
Mr. James.
Come on, Joe, give it up.
Tubal Cain.
Tubal Cain?
Sorry.
Those were some clips from a TV show back in the 90s called News Radio. And yes, I agree that if you go to court and you mention Tubal Cain that you're going to get off. No, I do not. But what it is showing you and kind of mocking us that we don't know this, but there is an unwritten language that is going on between the Brotherhood that has been passed down for centuries and centuries. That where John Dee left off and his discoveries, things that he was working on, that it has been passed on. It's still continuing today under other names, alchemy and those things like that. They were mixing magic, science, and religion all together. It was just a melting pot. I also find it very interesting that a very famous Arthur C. Clarke, a science fiction writer, has a great quote. It says, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And when you start researching and connecting the dots of what's going on with NASA, technology, the magic of the Illuminati and music behind the Illuminati, the frequencies and tones, they are the builders, and nothing has changed. All it is being repackaged under new names for our day and time. The next clip I'm going to play, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but this is a great clip on John Dee and when, they picked up where he left off, and that is what CERN and D-Wave, part of the compartmentalization that is going on to communicate back and forth from one realm to the next. And once that doorway is opened all the way, you cannot shut it. You're going to let something into this realm that is not supposed to be in this realm. It was put here by the Creator for a reason, for protection. Firmament over the earth, call it whatever you want. Please enjoy this clip. I'll be right back after this.
The discovery of the Hermeticum during the Renaissance created a new generation of occultists. They sought to combine religion with science and magic, a dangerous undertaking in a society ruled by Christianity. John Dee would risk his life to study its teachings.
John Dee was a giant. John Dee was the embodiment of the ideal of an enlightened being who had the spiritual understanding of his role and mission in life, and who was gifted with, superior intelligence.
But like Pythagoras, he would pay a heavy price for daring to seek out the wisdom of the gods. The ultimate Renaissance man, Dee followed in the footsteps of Paracelsus, using experimentation to become a gifted scientist, an inventor, a mathematician, a brilliant cryptographer, and a pioneer in the field of navigation.
But he was also an occultist, he was a sorcerer, he was an astrologer. He was, in fact, Queen Elizabeth's personal court astrologer. And in that sense, his interests were all very much in keeping with the thinking of the time. There wasn't a distinction made between magic and science, and he was pursuing an understanding of the world around him.
When Queen Elizabeth rose to the throne of England in 1558, she installed Dee as court astrologer, but his influence reached far beyond his position. England's famous magician was also a spy for the Queen.
He was involved with political intrigue. He was a trusted ally of the Queen, but he was also working behind the scenes throughout Europe to help to lower the power of the church and to substitute Protestant power in its stead.
With Dee's guidance, Queen Elizabeth officially legitimized the most significant occult science of the Renaissance, alchemy. Alchemists had two goals: to heal illness and to turn base metal into gold. They believed success could be achieved by finding the Philosopher's Stone, a mystical agent that would also produce a higher level of consciousness in the alchemist.
That was really an approach to trying to understand the way the physical world works, and alchemy as a practice, was the forefather of modern chemistry.
Alchemy had existed since the early Egyptians, but in the hands of the Renaissance scientists, it reached new heights.
Everything that we know and do today in our modern science was developed by the alchemists. Laboratory techniques were part of the alchemical tradition. The observation of results, the scientific method is a child of alchemy.
Alchemists were on the leading edge of science. They discovered phosphorus, zinc, the distillation of alcohol, the germ nature of diseases. They were the first to understand how blood circulates in the body. The Church viewed their unorthodox experiments and scientific breakthroughs with growing suspicion.
We are speeding up what nature does. We're speeding up the rate at which the metals evolve. We're speeding up the rate at which medicines are combined and raise consciousness. And the Church felt that you can't be speeding up God's creation without recourse to demons.
Despite his work in alchemy, Dee's true occult passion lay in divination. He believed that he could apply scientific methods to communicate with supernatural beings. Dee's obsession with contacting the angels would have disastrous consequences. This art of manipulating objects like bones, tea leaves, and tarot cards had arrived from the Muslim East in the 14th century and become a popular method of fortune-telling. But Dee used a divination method known as scrying. Dee relied on looking into a crystal ball that would reflect back supernatural information.
Scrying is a long-time-old technique, scrying into glasses, mirrors, bodies of water, anything that would have a reflective surface, and see if you could see not just the material things, but the spiritual things standing behind.
These efforts were unsuccessful until one day a young man named Edward Kelly appeared at his door. Kelly seemed to have the talent to see into the shadow world.
Their system involved Edward Kelly looking into a amethyst crystal and describing what he saw, and John Dee would then record these communications.
Kelly began receiving messages from the angels. They spoke in a language he called Enochian, from the lost biblical book of Enoch. These transmissions are early examples of what New Age followers now call channeling.
What Dee and Kelly brought forth was completely new. It was not based on tradition.
He appeared to be speaking a new language.
The Enochian language does appear to have a coherent vocabulary and syntax, and this doesn't seem like the sort of thing that Kelly, who was not a particularly educated or schooled person, could have just invented. He couldn't have faked something like that.
John Dee and Kelly embarked on a tour of Europe to share their discoveries, just as the Inquisition launched another crackdown against heretics.
All you needed was a slight change in political or religious circumstance, and something that was considered exceptionally wonderful would then be considered demonic and scary.
Dee returned home to England to find that a mob had destroyed his irreplaceable library and scientific and occult instruments. Dee had fallen out of favor with the court. The man who began as a leading scientist of the Renaissance ended his life penniless, branded as a sorcerer.
Dee's main legacy is not to science, it is to magic. And it's because of those who have come after, who have seized upon what he created and made it into a new worldview, whether it's consciousness arts or ceremonial magic or divination, could take place inside these new parameters that they set up.
John Dee's fall was the beginning of the occult's end. The practices were reviled by the Church as the work of demonic possession. From the 14th through the 16th century, more than 40,000 people would be executed for witchcraft. Occult ideas became embedded in the traditions of secret societies, such as the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians.
They were tending to do them passed on among secret brotherhoods and organizations because these are very powerful and dangerous ideas, dangerous to status quo, dangerous to institutionalized religion. So there's an element of underground secrecy associated with some of these themes.
These havens of safety began to flourish across Europe. Secret societies were instrumental in the new age of enlightenment. that swept through Europe in the 1700s and even helped in the founding of American democracy.
So there you have it, the brotherhood. And that's part of the problem in 2017 is most on the face of the earth do not believe in a brotherhood. If you do believe in the brotherhood, you're a conspiracy nut, wacko, whatever you want to say. But this still does exist. It goes by different names. Call it what you want. They're all Luciferian. It could be Bilderbergers, Illuminati, Rosicrucianists back in the day, Freemasonry now at the top levels. So that's one of the problems. But also, they mock us in movies, videos, in the news, Olympics. I mean, it's all over the place. That they're showing you who they are. You just have to learn their language. Centuries ago and throughout history, the octopus, Rothschild's octopus, the English throne, that was a symbol. The octopus was a symbol of having tentacles, so to speak, into everything, into money, trade, education, technology, whatever that was, science. The octopus has been a long, long time symbol of that, outreaching. There's plenty of good videos out there that talk of the symbolism of the octopus. I have one of those on my website as well. But, I mean, even just to show you how they mock us and put it in our face, you've got the 2015 London Olympics. Right there, the octopus, the tentacles going out, and and someone, I don't know if anybody's touched on this, but notice that it's newspaper. The stage is newspaper, NEWS. That's code also for all over the world. The news, yes, but north, east, west, south news. It's also on the Masonic tracing board as well, which, that's a whole nother video. But the outstretched tentacles of the brotherhood, the kingdoms of this world that have been given to Satan, and that's another problem, is Jesus was took up on a high mountain. Satan took him there, asked him to bow down. If you worship me, I will give you the kingdoms of this world. And there still are for an age. And people have a big time problem with that. Sorry, that's the plan for an age. Even in the James Bond intros and movies, they mock Christ. They're showing you he actually plays the Christ figure that they mock and copy.
So what's yours?
Resurrection.
Everybody needs a hobby. So what's yours?
Resurrection.
just relax. That's it, lovely. Now, you may feel a small
Christ!
prick.
What is it?
Cutting-edge nanotechnology. Smart blood. Microchips in your bloodstream allows us to track your movements in the field.
Well, I hope you're starting to see the connection of the mocking, the symbolism within the James Bond series. Also the connections of, remember, Tubal Cain was an inventor, an iron and bronze worker, artificer, things that he created, techniques, technologies back in the day. The same thing with James Bond. He's always got a gadget. He's always got the sharpest cars, that connection, that information. And where this goes back to is where is mankind getting all of this technology and ideas like D-Wave and CERN, things of this nature? It falls back to Tubal Cain and Cain, the descendants of Cain. The other part of the confusion with people is when you throw out Enoch, that they stay away from it. But if you understand, there are two Enochs in the Bible. There are two lines spoken of in the Bible, and there is the Enoch, the good Enoch, which is from the Seth line, which walked with God, and God took him up because of his testimony was great. But then there's the evil Enoch, which is a totally different Enoch that comes from the lineage of Cain. This is the one that is referenced in John Dee's work, is the Enochian language, communing with angels, bad angels. So that is, when you learn that, it opens up a lot of understanding of what is going on. The next clip I'm going to play is from a movie coming out, Mind Gamers. But before we move on, I want to touch on something and connect another dot here in real world, not just movies and referencing music videos. I want to reference something else. This technology that has been shared with us. Let's go back to CERN and what they're up to. The next thing, the next phase is called the Awake Project within CERN. And the people that are heading that up and spearheading it per se is the Max Planck Institute, which is the Max Planck Society, which is behind that sponsors it. This society is headquartered in none other than Bavaria, Germany. Does that sound familiar to you? It should. For those who are into conspiracies, the Illuminati came out of Bavaria, Germany originally. And the logo tells you something else deeper. The logo is of Minerva. It is a Roman goddess. And for those who have looked at my documentaries and videos in the past, they, the elite, the ruling class right now, believe in a Holy Roman Empire that will be resurrected toward the end. So there you go with their logo, Minerva. And let's take it a step further. Minerva was known for her owl and all of her depictions. She has an owl, and that is also significant because an owl sees in the dark. It is enlightened per se. You are enlightened because you see light in the dark. That's the owl representation as well, that she is constantly associated with her owl. So there you have the connections of the science, the technology, everything. And the next clip is from Mind Gamers that is going to be rolling out the 28th of March. Please enjoy this clip, and I'll be right back.
You cannot possibly begin to understand what you're about to witness. I give you Enoch, a quantum connection with the human mind.
You connected all of us. This can't stop. I want more.
We could do everyone. No, someone has to stay off the system.
Give the word.
I will connect you all. Do not fear it. 3, 1.
when I saw this trailer, I was like, wow. I mean, it would just, it is right out there of everything I've been showing for years and years. Let me just read the storyline here, guys, to this movie coming out. Storyline to this movie is a group of brilliant young students discover the greatest scientific breakthrough of all time, a wireless neural network connected via a quantum computer capable of linking the minds of each and every one of us. They realize that the quantum theory can be used to transfer motor skills from one brain to another. They freely spread this technology, believing it to be a first step towards a new equality and intellectual freedom. But they soon discover, get this guys, but they soon discover that they themselves are part of a much greater and more sinister experiment as dark forces emerge that threaten to subvert this technology into a means of mass control. Wow. Man, this is how pre-programming works. It's rolled out to the movies, to the masses, and by the time it gets to the real world, everybody thinks it's part of a science fiction movie that they saw years ago, because this is exactly what D-Wave quantum computing is about. This is what CERN is about, is this whole thing of quantum computing. If you're not familiar with CERN or D-Wave, watch some of my older videos. There's other videos on the web as well. That's in real life companies and things that are going on in real life of connecting brain to brain, one hive mind. We've been saying it for a while, and look at this, what's coming out. And there's more to come. There's so many things in the movies and media coming out all the time now. It's just red flags going up. The people that are awake are screaming. And the people that are asleep are going, man, you guys are nuts. But I'm used to that. So here we go with the trailer. I mean, right here off the bat, the abyss opening up, the CERN symbolism. He actually calls the opening Enoch. What you're seeing here is the communications that people will think they're communicating with good angels, and it's the bad angels. But anyway, we'll move on. That's the symbolism of CERN opening a doorway, calls it Enoch. It is a reference to the Enochian language of the angels that were not good angels. They led people astray. Magic. So let's move on. Now watch this next part. I've got it paused. And look what happens when they connect. Once this person is uploaded to the quantum computer, one hive mind, one network, everything that I've been shown, these people that put these movies together, they know exactly what's going on and they know what's coming, and they're mocking us, knowing that we can't see it. Did you see that? A cross comes out. I'll do it again. Boom. The cross comes out. Because it can't, the cross, the grace of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, cannot dwell in that host body anymore. You've made a choice to try to live forever another way, this technology in the future. So this trailer, let's go on a little bit further with the trailer. So you'll see all throughout the trailer right here, the hexagon, which is 2D. If you do the three-dimensional, it's the cube. Cube worship, Saturn worship, Satan worship. It's all the same. It's all connected in the alert there. So you see that all through the trailer. So now you see a group of them dancing the magician and behind the table, or the symbolism of the Antichrist behind the pulpit magician above them. And listen to what is said next. It is totally from the Garden of Eden of a lie, that you surely won't die, don't fear it. Now listen to this statement.
I will connect you all. Do not fear it.
connect you all, do not fear it. Partaking of the wrong knowledge, it's just a repeat of what's going to happen in the future. Now watch man reaching out his hand, trying to live another way, immortal, another way. The symbolism here, look right here in the trailer, and you're going to say, I'm going to show you the staircase ascending of the Freemasonic staircase, trying to Tower of Babel. It's all symbolism, trying to ascend, Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin. It's all there. I mean, and I've showed you the secret for years and years of transhumanism, where they're headed, and the Illuminati. You see all these people doing YouTube of the Illuminati eye and what it stands for, the one eye symbolism. On the back of the dollar bill, they're building a temple the wrong way. They're trying to build the Mark of the Beast temples to be controlled, the one eye. Now, watch this. Right here, the secret is revealed right to you, right in front of you. Watch very closely. Boom, one eye. There it is, folks. A transhuman vessel, a host that the Holy Spirit can't dwell in. Only demonic can dwell in it. And it's going to be a living hell. And the prophecy in Revelation is men are going to want to die and they cannot. And this is one of the reasons why they've downloaded their consciousness, their souls into transhuman vessels, cannot die. Well, I hope that you see where humanity is being led and pre-programmed to go, and it's not a good path. So I hope I've connected some dots for you, shown you where Freemasonry has started through Tubal-Cain, the two Enochs. You'll have to do some research on your own, but at least you've got some things to work with here, I hope. And also, the last trailer that I'm going to play for you is from Alien Covenant, and it is a second part to the Prometheus movie, but it's going to show you the pre-programming, and you're going to have to remember this, whether it's in your lifetime, your children's lifetime. The alien deception is coming. It will be told to you, I don't know how, that we came from aliens, that we were hybridized from aliens. It will go against the Creator, and that you were not created in His image. You were created in an alien race, whatever that is. And this is where the technology came from. This is where they're going to say the technology came from, is aliens and everything. But with this video, you should be able to discern now what is really going on. Is this has been here before, it has been destroyed and wiped out, and as it continues and goes down this path, it will be wiped out again as we get closer for the final time. That is the second coming. Whether you believe that or not, that is on you. But with this information, I hope that I've cleared up a lot of confusion out there. I love you guys, and thank you for waiting so patiently on this. It took me, 6 months to put together. Hope it was worth the time. I try to put all into it from the start to the finish. Please share and enjoy.
If we choose to collapse one reality, the other will be forced into existence.
Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress this to you enough. Stop what you're doing. You need to see this video. The creator of D-Wave, the CIA-backed quantum computing company, states that being near a quantum computer is like standing at the altar of an alien god. Now, some of you might say, well, yeah, no duh. But that's not all you need to hear within this. You need to hear his predictions. Because in 10 to 15 years, we might not have our jobs. Computers will have taken their place. We just released this bombshell about 10 minutes ago. And of course, it's got theoretical physics in it, and it's got quantum computing or computer science in it. For those of you who are a bit questionable on those two topics, you need to begin to understand why we've been covering this technology for so long. Why we've basically been covering it all year long. A lot of people don't like to talk about this stuff. They don't want to understand it. But this right here should change your very opinion about it. How important it is to understand what's going on with technology. You wonder why Google and YouTube are trying to shut down our channel and other channels that talk about this stuff. Because a lot of people would not know. Not because they're not able to understand it, but because the information can't flow. And when the information can't flow, these sorts of things slip through our grasps of exposing and understanding. Now, granted, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to expose every single thing about this because I don't know it all. But I do know a few things. I do know that the creator of D-Wave is comparing his machine to a living being. And he is stating that being around one or being near one is like standing at the altar of an alien god. I also know what else he said in here. Let me go back down to it. He is stating that his D-Wave system has a heartbeat of ice. Now, as interesting as that may sound, it's the truth. They're building artificial intelligence humanoids. Now, that may sound a bit out there. It may sound a bit sci-fi or whatever. I'm not saying it. They are. All I've done in this report, besides add the truth and, of course, the Bible and how it all lines up, is repeat their words. That's what these are here. These are quotes from what he was saying. Not me. These are quotes from what he is saying. They're talking about, parallel universes and parallel realities. You need to see this. Now, later on this week, we're going to be doing something else. And if you're not a member, an unlimited member of Freedom Fighter Times, you're going to want to see this content that we have, that we're working on putting all together right now. We did a big expose not too long ago, a big unlimited expose, or an exclusive expose, about artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence, that went all over the place. We saw our trailers everywhere and so on and so forth. Now, we're about to do another one that size. This is huge. It is bombshell. Yes, it's about CERN. CERN is creating artificial life, and they've been doing it for years. CERN scientists, I should say, more specifically. We'll be hopefully releasing that later on this week. If you're not a member, you need to be a member so you can see this. But I would like if I can get all of you to stop what you're doing and come watch this video. I don't care if you download it from our site. I don't care if you go to the original YouTube video that posted this, Idea City. Just watch and understand what he is saying. What they are doing to our world. They think they're bettering it. They're destroying it. As they grasp at shadows, is what he says. From the other worlds, other universes, and parallel realities. Artificial realities, or the virtual reality, that's all coming about. And within the next 15 years, according to him, we will no longer be the smartest beings on Earth, if you want to say that. They're building a machine that's going to outperform and outsmart humans. And it will be done by the year 2028. Now, I don't like to talk about imminent doom, and I don't like to set dates. I'm telling you a date that the creator of D-Wave is saying. I'm not saying it myself. But I have said in previous videos, I do believe that by the year 2030, our world will not be recognizable. Because of the agenda, number one, by the UN, the Sustainable Development Agenda, that has a lot of technology in it that nobody is really seeing. They're building an artificial world. You need to understand what's actually going on. Stop what you're doing and come watch this. Take a break from work and come watch this. Whatever you got to do, you need to see what's going on.
speaker at this particular TED conference is Geordie Rose. Geordie Rose is the founder of D-Wave. D-Wave is the manufacturer of the 4096 adiabatic quantum computer.
So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
And that's very significant because the D-Wave is the very quantum computer that runs CERN and is also at Google, and NASA also has a D-Wave. And these D-Waves have been moving up as far as power is concerned and capability very quickly. And he gets into some very, very interesting things in this speech that he gives. And I will tell you this right now, that this speech will definitely change the way you think about whether or not CERN or quantum computers are dangerous to our current reality. Now, at 13 minutes and 28 seconds, he says parallel universes. Please pay close attention to his description of the qubit. Please. Because he talks about parallel universes and how the value of a qubit is the only thing different in the parallel universe. You get to a chip, which is about 500 of these bits. And in that video, he's actually referring to his 512 model. Something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip. And what he means is that's the number of parallel universes living on that chip. On that one chip, 2 to the 500th power. That's huge. Now, mind you, they are now at the 4096 model. So you're talking about an exponential increase, an unbelievable exponential increase into their accesses of parallel universes. He goes on to say that the shadow of these parallel worlds overlap with ours, and if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world. Isn't that interesting? Now, this is out of the guy's own mouth, and please feel free to watch this, because, again, this will make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. This is why I think, and this is one of the main ways that they're trying to bust through the, quote, matrix, is utilizing these quantum computers and utilizing particle accelerators like CERN, where they can create enough energy to burn through the veil. It's the only way I can explain it. So you got to check that stuff out. Mr. Altman seems to echo that fear, this fear that if civilization stops advancing, then that may be due to some calamitous event that stops civilization. And he says that he was concerned about the way that the devices that surround us might lead to the extinction of all consciousness in the universe. He spoke about how the best scenario for dealing with that is to merge when our brains and computers become one, perhaps by having our brains uploaded into the cloud. Yeah, because that is really, yum. A lot of transhumanists would prefer that. Think about that. You never have to die. You wouldn't get disease. You just upload yourself into cloud. You have whatever reality you want. No problem. Love, peace, and harmony. And this is what they're doing. This is why I'm so concerned. The Russian things and all that, the World War III, very serious. Don't get me wrong. But there's never been a time in human history, except pre-Diluvian, where we as human beings have messed with this kind of stuff. And it's got some pretty dire consequences, I'm thinking.
Consider this next group of speakers somewhat unusual, if not to say strange. We have the creator of what is the world's first quantum computer, in person here from Burnaby, BC. We have the president of the super high-tech company that makes Canada's iconic Canada Arm, but whose hobby it is to try and reconcile modern science with the Bible. And we have a filmmaker from Los Angeles who has stumbled on what appears to be evidence of life after death. And my thought in putting together this somewhat improbable combination of speakers was that out there where the theory of the very large and the very small connect, and out there where our 13.7 billion year old and expanding universe touches the void, you come upon mystery and the possibility of God. That was my thinking. So let's begin with Jordy. Jordy, I don't understand much about quantum computing except that it's supposed to be the next big thing in power and in speed, and that you are the only company in the world now actually making one.
Well, hopefully after this 17 minutes, you'll understand what they are and be excited about what you might be able to use them for.
These are really big deals. They come in at about 15 or $20 million a piece.
Something like that.
And have been bought by major American research and corporations.
That's correct.
All right, Jordy.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. So quantum computing is a very technical subject, and I'm not going to talk a lot about the specific details, of which I'm sure you're glad. But I'm going to try to give you an idea about what the kind of thing is that we build and why people are so excited about it. But I'm going to wrap that story in another story. How many of you have children? Let's see, hands. So it's almost everybody. So I have 3 children. The youngest is 4, the oldest is 8. And they're very different, but they share one thing in common. And the parents in the audience may, I suspect, have noticed the same thing. Each of my children has fixated on a particular stuffed animal as being their special friend or toy. And in particular, my middle son, James, absolutely loves this little guy called Bear Bear, which is the picture that I'm showing up here. Bear Bear was a limited release Thai Beanie Baby, and there aren't very many of them that were made of his particular form. And one Christmas, I decided that it would be insurance policy to go and try to buy some more just in case something happened to Bear Bear. So I went on the internet and did a search, and I was only able to locate 2 others that were for sale, and I bought both of them. So now he has 3 of these little guys. But the reason that it occurred to me that this might be a good place to start is a conversation that I had with him last week. He wanted to sleep with his older brother in his bedroom, and his older brother wouldn't let him. And he was very sad and despondent, and he's like, I'm scared, I don't want to sleep by myself. And I said, well, you've got Bear Bear. And he said to me, Bear Bear isn't real. And so I found this very intensely distressing for a variety of reasons that maybe you'll understand when I go through this. And I assured him that Bear Bear was as real as anything else in the world. And he said, but he can't speak and he can't move. And so I said, well, what you really mean is he's not alive. And he said, yes, that's what I mean. So for very young children, the sense of being real and the sense of being alive are somehow connected. And I'm going to circle back to this point at the end. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about quantum computers and why people care so much about them. There are literally tens of thousands of some of the brightest people in the world today trying to build these machines and understand them. And I'm going to tell you why. In my last 15 years of working on this type of stuff, I found that scientists divide up into 2 categories of zealots about this field. The first half are people who are absolutely entranced by the physics of these things. This quote is from a respectable scientist, in fact, one of the founders of this field, that may look a little strange to you who don't follow theoretical physics, but there is a very clear prediction that our most successful theory of nature makes, and that is that there are an enormous number, mind-bogglingly large number, of parallel realities, as real as this one, that have different consistent histories. So imagine a world where all of the laws of physics as we know them are obeyed, but different decisions were made along the way. Different decisions at the level of tiny microscopic particles, different decisions all the way up to what you chose to eat for lunch, and whether you chose to come to this session or not. Quantum mechanics makes a very specific prediction that all of those are as real as the thing that you remember. And this is bizarre, because we don't see those other things. But science has reached the point now where we can build machines that exploit those other worlds. And quantum computers are perhaps the most exciting of all of these that we have within, or almost within our grasp right now. So people from a physics background love this. They want to understand the world. They want to understand the universe, how it all works. There's another type of person who tends to come from the computer science side that's like, yeah, okay, that's all great. But there's a different thing going on here, which is just as exciting, if not more, and that these machines that supposedly can do this wild stuff, let's forget about how they work, if you could build one, could solve problems that you could never, ever solve with any computer of the sort that we built. If you took every single atom of silicon in the world and made the most sophisticated conventional Intel-style processor that you could build, there are problems we know of that I could write down on a sheet of paper that you could never, ever, ever solve with that thing, that you could with this kind of machine. So that's very exciting. Humans use tools to do things. If you give humans a new kind of tool that can do things that you couldn't otherwise do, imagine the possibilities. So you may think, well, this is all fine and dandy, but aren't these things in the realm of theory and speculation kind of in the same regime as other futuristic things you may have heard of which may be allowed by the laws of physics but aren't here yet? That's not true. There are in fact many of these machines deployed now in openly available research centers following the model that was used to introduce supercomputers to the world. They're too big and ornery and difficult to operate to put in your home, too expensive also, but you can give them to a place which will manage them as a shared resource that will offer that service to the world. And there are two of these now. One of them is at the University of Southern California. And this analogy with flight, I think, is an interesting one. So a horse can beat, or could beat, the initial flight of the Wright brothers' flight in speed. But a plane is not a faster horse. A plane is a different kind of machine. The plane takes advantage of another thing, another resource that nature gives us, this third dimension, in order to do something that matters to people better that you could do with any horse. It doesn't matter how fast you make a horse, it will never fly, at least the kinds of horses that we know about. So these types of computers now are being thought of in the same way. They're not terrifically powerful yet, but they're doing something completely different than what your computer does. And that thing is like flight. It gives these computers access to these new resources, maybe you could call them parallel universes, in order to do something that you couldn't otherwise do. And that's not the only one. In fact, the one I'm going to come back to and talk to in the context of the story that I'm wrapping this in was recently installed at NASA. And Google was the primary interested party that pulled this whole thing together. And this one is really exciting to me, because what they're going to do is apply this machine to an area that I think is fundamentally important. It's the crux of our future as humans, and that's, can we build machines like us? So building machines like us might be possible. I certainly believe it is. I might be wrong. But what I do know is that the types of approaches that people are taking now to build intelligent machines benefit immensely from what this machine that we've built does best. So what this center is about is applying this beautiful new computational idea in the service of trying to make intelligent machines.
Now, I can't think of anything personally any cooler than trying to use quantum computers to build intelligent machines, so this is very exciting to me. Steve Jurvetson has been a longtime friend and investor in the company, and for those of you who don't know him, he's a Silicon Valley investor who's probably the smartest VC that I know of, and certainly the one that's the most attuned to technological trends. He's on the board of SpaceX, Tesla, Synthetic Genomics, which is Craig Venter's company, is trying to build artificial life, and D-Wave, and that's it. And this is his particularly poetic way of framing the difference between the machines we build and conventional computers. This is what they look like. There are two of them. These are from our lab in Burnaby in British Columbia. From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths, big metal boxes, about 10 feet on a side, 12 feet tall. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Just a wisp, a fraction of a degree above absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space. Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines. At the heart of this big box is a tiny chip about the size of your thumbnail. And on this chip resides all of the wonder and magic that makes this thing go. I'm not going to describe in any mathematical detail how it all works, but let me give you an analogy. In quantum mechanics, there's this concept that a thing can exist in two states which are mutually exclusive at the same time, quote unquote. And I'm using those words because the English language was developed before we had concepts to describe what these things actually are doing. But I'm going to give you a roundabout way of understanding this. Imagine that there really are parallel universes out there, and now imagine you have two that are exactly identical in every respect, all the way out to the horizon as far as we can see, down to the last little atomic detail of every single thing, with only one difference. And that's the value of a little thing called a qubit on this chip, which is a contraction of quantum bit. And that qubit is very much like a bit or a transistor in a conventional computer. It has two distinct physical states, which we call 0 and 1 for bit. In a conventional computer, these are mutually exclusive. That device is either one or the other, and never anything else. In a quantum computer, that device can be in this strange situation where these two parallel universes have a nexus, a point in space where they overlap. And when you increase the number of these devices, every time you add one of these qubits, you double the number of these parallel universes that you have access to, until such time when you get to a chip like this, which has about 500 of these bits, you have something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip. So the way I think about it is that the shadows of these parallel worlds overlap with ours. And if we're smart enough, we can dive into them and grab their resources and pull them back into ours to make an effect in our world. Now, this may sound very odd to you and bizarre, and in fact, I am using language that a normal theoretical physicist probably wouldn't use, but this is, what I'm telling you is absolutely correct and in line with the way that these things actually work. We've been doing this for some time now, and in fact, we have our own version of Moore's Law. The doubling of the number of these qubits on the chip has happened once a year for the past 9 years.
So for the last 9 years, every year the number of these qubit devices has doubled, and it will continue to do so. As a point of reference in terms of how fast these things are, in one generation of chip, the one from the system that was installed at USC to the one that Google and NASA have now, the speed of the device went up by almost 500,000. This is the kind of progress that you're going to see with these types of machines going forward. And 500,000 sounds like an abstract number, but I put up a little mental comparison here to see what 5,000 really means. 500,000 is a big number when it comes to speed. All right, so now I'm getting into the last part of my talk where I'm going to make some predictions, some dangerous predictions. So predictions are very dangerous for a variety of reasons. Often they're wrong, which is one. But I think they're important because predictions somehow are our internal desires made manifest. Predictions are about what we want to happen, maybe not what will happen. And I'm going to make 3 predictions, and all of them are dangerous in the sense that they're very unlikely to happen, maybe, but I think that there's a very good chance that they may. As an aside, I just wanted to say that at least in the Valley, Silicon Valley, and maybe in the United States in general, there's a very deep feeling of unease about the way technology has been developing. Because we have all of these vast array of very smart people, and what they're doing is crap. They're building things that cannot last. They're building things that are not important. This is a little bit of a controversial point of view, but I believe it. But I think that the reason for this is it's low-hanging fruit. Computers haven't been around for a long time. And I think that what's going to happen is that as people get more comfortable with computers, the attention will turn from the Twitters and the Facebooks to very important things. So here's my first prediction. I'm going to predict that by 5 years, NASA will have found an Earth-like planet with Earth-like atmosphere and water on it, and serious people will start discussing how we get there. And by the way, they're going to use one of our machines to help do this. So that's my first prediction. My second prediction is that this business of parallel universes is going to turn out to be very important. This picture that I've got under here is what's called a gravitational lens. When Einstein proposed his general theory of relativity, it came with a bunch of experiments that you could use to test it. And one of them was that if there was a point of light very far away in a galaxy in the middle, that galaxy should bend the light and you should see a ring. And this was eventually observed. And I think what's going to happen is somebody is going to come up with an experiment to test this reality of these things. And we're going to be able to do so. My third prediction that I'm going to end on is the most important of all. I believe that humanity is on the cusp of the most important technological, societal revolution that's ever occurred. And that's when we got to the point where the machines that we build outpace us in every respect. I don't mean that they're better calculators. I don't mean that they're better at searching. I mean everything. And I think that we're very close. And my prediction is that within 15 years, we will have machines that outpace humans in everything. Thank you very much.
What I'm going to do is share with you the calendar from CERN and then the associated things that I have tacked on to that calendar that are going on in the rest of the world. And that involves the Vatican. Well, what I'm reading from is CERN's, what they call their injector accelerator schedule. And this really tells you what the machine is going to be doing. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of things without getting too elaborate with it. May 1st of this year is May Day. That's in celebration of Axis Mundi. That is the axis of the earth. That is the connection between heaven and earth. So what we're talking about here in this discussion of CERN, and we'll be talking about with quantum computers as well, is the spiritual world, because that's what's at play with the physics at CERN. And this is all being directed through the Jesuit Society, of which the director of the Council of CERN and the director for engineering and computation at CERN, both are Jesuits. This is a Jesuit-led organization, and the calendar I'm sharing with you is built by the Jesuits. So when we talk about Axis Mundi and the connection between heaven and earth, we are talking about the discussion many times of connecting planets from CERN, specifically with Saturn.
I find that fascinating.
So
the trying to connect, and we know that there's a hexagram on the one side of Saturn, and many believe it's a portal and a gateway. And for folks who might not be familiar with Anthony Patch or his work on CERN, CERN is a particle accelerator that is in Switzerland. It's the biggest machine of its kind in the world, and I'm not even going to try to explain any more of the technical aspects of it, because I will just make a fool of myself. I'll leave that to you. But yeah, the spiritual world is something that I want to hit on. So when we get there, because there are reasons why this is in the spiritual world, what they're not only trying to do is open up portals, but what we're seeing is what we saw, or what happened back in the beginning, after the creation, where, you know, with the Tower of Babel and Nimrod, a one world government, trying to build a stairway or portal to heaven to overthrow God. This is where we're going with this. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Patch.
No, and I'll try to make my comment short, because I would like to hear from you guys. Usually on your programs, your guest is just running for several minutes in a discussion, and I would like to have more of a conversation with you gentlemen.
We can do that.
Okay. So we've got May 1st as May Day. And it is also in France, in particular with the Labour Party, they're calling for a day of strike. In fact, a worldwide strike on May 1st. May 8th, with the collider itself, they will be firing up, so to speak, their newest collider, their newest accelerator, I should be more specific, which is called Awake. And that is a linear accelerator. It's only 30 meters long, but it's been conjoined with the 27-kilometer main ring of the Large Hadron Collider. They have two accelerators merged now since November of last year, when they did their first startup with Awake. What this means by joining these two is you have a 1,000-fold increase in the power derived from the collisions. And those collisions will be targeted, and I'll get to more specifics on time, but they are targeting the north area at the center point of the main ring, and that is where they will be introducing the DNA of Osiris, Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel. The purpose of the DNA is resurrection. The purpose of CERN is resurrection of the dead. So if you want to jump in there.
Is that the resurrection of the dead? Are we talking spiritual beings, or are we talking, you know, demonic entities that used to inhabit human bodies? Are we talking about human beings? Like
we're not talking. We're not. I mean, when you say resurrection of the dead, we're not talking actual. What one would say resurrection of the dead. Dead. We're talking about something different, right?
We are talking about the dead in the abyss.
Okay.
Because CERN is the doorway to the abyss.
Okay.
And they will be given the key to the abyss. So we are talking about back in the ancient times of Babylon, Sumerian, and also Egypt, in particular with Egypt. This was all their goal in the mummification of the kings and the gods, for a later resurrection when the technology was available.
Oh, okay.
So is this something like what we read about in Joel, where there will be
Joel's
a fire?
army?
Yeah, there will be a fire, and it talks about the appearance of them as the appearance of horses and as horsemen. So they run, they make noises like chariots. They shall run to and fro like mighty men. They shall climb walls like men of war. They shall be thrust with a spear, but no sword shall pierce them. They shall not be wounded. Yeah, Joel's army.
Yes, in addition to the locust army.
All right.
So when we get to that point, we know we're in the tribulation period. Are we going to see a setup to this? Are we going to have to see the man of perdition reveal himself to be the Antichrist before this happens, or is this something that could happen before the Antichrist comes on the scene?
Yes, I believe this is before the Antichrist is made known, that this is the resurrection not only of the dead in the abyss, but the resurrection of the spirit of the Antichrist. And one of the indicators of that is Revelation 12, September 23rd, when we see the birthing of Jupiter, of the spirit of the Antichrist. Now, many people are looking at Revelation 12 and relating it to perhaps the rapture. I'm not a date setter. It's conceivable. I adhere to the doctrine of imminence when it comes to the rapture. But what I think is more specific to the birthing in the constellation of Virgo that we're watching in Revelation 12 is the spirit of the Antichrist being birthed, and therefore the Antichrist later being revealed, following September 23rd, being revealed to us.
Now, for folks that might not be familiar, there is, on the 23rd of September, there is an astrological event. What's talked about in Revelation with the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, there's going to be a conjunction where if you look up in the sky, that's exactly what you'll see. And many people using computer programs like Stellarium and other astronomy programs say that this is the first time that this has happened or lined up in such a way where it matches with what Revelation says.
Yeah, it's been 6,000 years since this last alignment, and it will be another 6,000 years, according to Stellarium's software, that we'll see this alignment.
All right.
And I would just say that, I'm very, the date thing, everybody knows, not said dates, no man knows the hour. But like the blood moons, like the jubilees, it speaks to the signs of the times that we're in. Yes. And it's not to say that something is going to happen or that this is exactly what Revelation 12 was talking about, but it is very interesting when we see these events and they're happening, in proximity with this, huge technological expansion and the quantum computers, which we'll get into in a little bit because the advancements that they've continued to make there are unbelievable. But all these things seem to be happening in the same time, and they continue to be condensing as they continue to happen, which is cause for concern and cause for us to keep our eyes open.
Yeah. You're expecting things to happen, though, right? I mean, because we haven't seen anything happen. Well, let me back up here. We talk about CERN. Nothing's happened, right? Nothing's happened yet.
Depends on where you're looking.
Well, exactly. But I mean, to the average person out there, nothing's happened.
Right.
Okay, so go on.
Yeah, no, the obvious question is, well, there's been a lot of discussion by myself and others for several years about their goal is to open a doorway, to open a portal. Well, it hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because it's a matter of timing. And the timing is driven by their worship, their pagan belief in the constellations and their reverence for what they see as their godheads, their deities in the heavens, specifically Orion. And now we have Virgo, but we have to keep in mind that this is their belief system. It is not the belief system of those of us that are Christians.
And I love it. It's their. That's right. Belief is the driver of action. It's not what we believe. It's what they believe. And it's not our timetable, it's their timetable based on their system of worship and the dates and what have you. And I like how you put that. Folks, our guest is Anthony Patch. Go to anthonypatch.com. Joe, I'm going to kick it to you. Take us out.
AnthonyPatch.com is the website. There you can find links to a bunch of his interviews that he's done. He's got pages of research that are available for free. His YouTube channel, as well as the trailer for his books and excerpts from his
Revising
books.
Reality, his book.
Yeah. We'll be right back with Anthony Patch after these short messages. Stay with us. Guest from now until the end of the program is Mr. Anthony Patch. His website is anthonypatch.com. Check out some of his writings. His book that he co-authored with Josh Peck, Gonza Chimera, and Doug Woodward, Revising Reality, is available there, as well as his other books, Covert Catastrophe, as well as 2048, Diamonds in the Rough. There's also on his website several links to research, as well as other interviews that he has done with a number of hosts, all very informative. And if you want to know and learn about CERN and the spiritual ramifications of CERN and what they're doing, go to Mr. Patch's website, anthonypatch.com, bookmark it, and take your time and read through some of the stuff that's in there. And if you're like me, you're going to get into it and get very into it and then get very confused by the technical aspect of some of this stuff. I'm not a big math guy, Mr. Patch, but I do understand some of the concepts that you talk about, and the quantum computing is where it gets kind of confusing as far as the abilities and whatnot. I don't know where you want to start in this segment, but if you have nowhere to start or nowhere specific you want to go to, or is CERN? I'll ask this question to start out. How about this?
Sure.
Okay, CERN is looked upon by many people, a particle accelerator trying to find dark matter, the stuff that scientists say binds us together because we're all made of tiny particles with tons of space between us, and nobody understands how we're held together and how our reality is held together. Now, CERN is trying to find according to their official statement, they're trying to find the dark matter that binds us all together and that fills, however, 80-90% of the space around us and in our universe. But there is a much darker, more sinister spiritual agenda behind this, as we referenced in the last segment, of opening portals, not only between the spirit world and the physical world, but between portals between planets. How does the spiritual and physical world merging compare to trying to open portals between the planets, or is it really the same thing?
Well, if we look at the Kabbalah tree, that gives us a clue as to what their belief structure is. The Kabbalah tree represents all of the planets in our solar system, and it represents those electrical connections as well as the spiritual connections. So the Kabbalah is central to their belief system and their goal of reconnecting all of the planets, spiritually as well as physically. If we step back from that to a larger picture, the pagan worship, let's say more specifically, the worship by the Egyptians, was of what is known as the terrestrial heaven. The terrestrial heaven is not only the Earth itself, but all of the planets in our solar system. And so they assigned godheads and deities to each of the planets. And they worshiped the planets in their different aspects, whether they were male and female dual aspects, or their aspects as to their behavior, their personalities. And so the planets are represented by the Kabbalah tree, and that is the terrestrial heaven. And up until the time of Christ, the pagans were not aware of what is known as the celestial heaven, the heaven that exists beyond our solar system. And so they only knew the planets and therefore worshiped the sun, the moon, and the stars, as it says in Scripture, and that we are commanded not to worship the sun, the moon, and the stars, the terrestrial heaven. The pagans worshiped them. What we were called to worship, of course, was God and Jesus Christ and their occupancy of the celestial heaven. So that differentiation, I think, will help people to quantify or put into some kind of a tangible representation why the planets are important to the pagans and why the planets are important to the people at CERN, because their frame of reference is that terrestrial heaven. They're trying to breach the veil between the terrestrial heaven to gain access to the celestial heaven where God and Jesus Christ sit on the throne. So when we talk about opening a portal in a spiritual sense, that's the dynamic that's at play. It is moving from this terrestrial perspective to a celestial perspective.
Now, I don't know. This next question might be a little odd. The purposes of the portals, are they for the human beings? Because in my understanding, spiritual beings should be free to move about if they're not in the abyss, if they're not in hell, would be free to move about not only the planet in my mind, but in our solar system. We see in references in Job and other references in the Bible where the devil even comes to the throne of God and has conversations with him.
Sure.
So is this for the purpose of bringing this on the earth, or is this for the purpose also of bringing this to the physical human sight and mind?
Well, it's a two-way form of communication. It's allowing entities to come through to us that are at this point barred. It's allowing that, as we said earlier, that army from the abyss to enter our realm, our reality. They want to open the doorway to the abyss. Okay. That is their stated goal. But the other part of that, as you said, is for humans to ascend. In the New Age parlance, we hear of the fifth age, which the fifth age is due, the age of Aquarius is due in September. We're moving from the Hebraic calendar date of 5777, to 5778 in September. That, according to Nostradamus, now I'm not an adherent of Nostradamus, but I just cite it, September 9th is the birthing of the new age, the fifth age. That's the age of Aquarius. That's the golden age of Kronos. Kronos being Saturn, the timekeeper. So what they're looking at is the ascension from the New Age perspective, the ascension of mankind through this portal to that celestial heaven, which was the goal of Nimrod in building the Tower of Babel, was to reach to heaven. And it was that celestial heaven that he was trying to gain access to. It's the same agenda at play with CERN now, is for humans to ascend to that new level that the New Age practitioners always talk about in the fifth age, is moving to that celestial heaven through this portal.
Okay.
Select humans, though, right? I mean, or
so what you just explained was that we have
I think I've lost the signal.
Can you hear us, Mr. Patch?
Are we back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I lost you for a few moments there.
Okay, select humans, though. I mean, not all, or I mean, this is not a plan for all of humanity. This is a plan for the global Luciferian elite, right?
The benefactors.
That's correct.
To clarify. Okay.
And do they not think that, do they think they'll be spared for doing this, or rewarded for being, the tools that make this happen?
Very good point. This is to sidestep God's judgment. Now, you guys know as well as I do that Lucifer knows the scriptures, knows the Bible better than you and I do.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows what's coming, and he knows that his time is short. And therefore, his goal is to not only, as I've said on this show before, in his hubris, his goal is to kill God and his angels, that warfare, if you will, with Michael and his angels, but it is also to sidestep judgment. He truly believes in his grand deception in his own mind that he can defeat God.
Yeah. You look at Isaiah, the 5 I wills, I will exalt myself above, the stars in heaven. I will be like the Most High. and he goes through those things, and exactly that's what he says, and that's what they believe. So when you talk about the spirits that are locked up in the abyss that are attempting to be unlocked, this isn't for just the destruction of humanity. This is to prepare the armies of evil to fight against God and his angels.
That's correct.
And we're just in the way.
We are cannon fodder.
Interesting. Not a battle I'd want to be in the middle of.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to move on in the calendar just a little?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we were at May 1st with May Day and Axis Mundi, the connection between heaven and earth, that they will be celebrating at CERN. This is CERN's calendar, and I'm giving you holidays that they're celebrating at CERN. So that's one holiday. The next one that I would highlight is in September 7th. But just before I do that, I want to point out May 8th. May 8th is when that awake accelerator that's been merged with the main ring once again will be activated. So right after May 1st, they're going to fire up this new particle accelerator, and they will continue to do that until the 18th of December. They'll be running those two together, and we can get into the details of that later, but I want to jump to September 7th. And I cannot pronounce this because I don't speak French, but this is June Genevois. This is the date, the holiday in Geneva, as well as in France, celebrating or respecting, acknowledging the massacre that occurred with St. Bartholomew. This goes to the Reformation. This is St. Luther. This is St. Bartholomew and Luther and the Reformation of the church back in the 1500s. St. Bartholomew was skinned alive during this Reformation. And the reason that this is pertinent to our discussion of CERN is that St. Bartholomew is depicted in the Vatican by Michelangelo on let me look at my notes here. This was when the persecution of the Protestants took place in Lyon, France. But the Last Judgment in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, the Last Judgment is depicted in the dome by Michelangelo of St. Bartholomew. And St. Bartholomew is depicted as a man holding his skin. He was literally skinned alive. And so this ties back to my first comment about the Vatican being involved with CERN. CERN is celebrating, they're taking the day off to celebrate the massacre and the martyrdom of St. Bartholomew and the Reformation of the church. This all ties into the one world religion. What is going on with the Vatican, with St. Francis, is the merging of all of the Protestant religions with the Catholic religion, forming the one world religion. This all ties into the agenda at CERN because they want a one world government, which essentially that's what CERN represents right now, is a one world government with the countries that are involved at CERN, and the fact that it is like the Vatican, it is a separate entity. It is a nation state. CERN is. Same as the Vatican. The Vatican runs CERN, and they are trying to bring together this one world government and one world religion. And that is what is behind driving this agenda to open this portal at CERN. So go ahead and jump in there.
These dates that you're going through on the calendar, are these stepping stones that they're taking to get to a final place, or is this calendar? Do they have I guess my question is, do they have a plan, a step-by-step plan, or are they pushing limits to see if it'll get them where they want to go?
And what happens if they miss something?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that they're going to miss anything. This has been very deliberate. I think in the physics progression, in the scientific progression, they've hit all their landmarks. They've been successful. And according to Revelation 9, they will ultimately open the portal. They will be successful. And this is part of God's plan. He's allowing this to take place. This is a tool of judgment. This is going to backfire on these guys. But the portal will open because it is the doorway to the abyss in Revelation 9. But September 7th, this whole St. Bartholomew is a stepping stone towards September 23rd in Revelation 12. And the birth that is taking place, as I said, the realization of the Antichrist spirit in the constellation Virgo. But there's a coalescence going on. There's a coming together in September. The Vatican is celebrating a 50th Jubilee and a 500th Jubilee, and also the 100th anniversary of Fatima. This is all happening in September. And Pope Francis will be traveling to to Germany, to Wittenberg, Germany, in celebration of the 500th Jubilee. The 50th Jubilee will also be celebrated, and that has to do with Israel. But the 500th Jubilee is this St. Bartholomew discussion. This is the Reformation. It is the co-Reformation. Co meaning the Protestant and the Catholic churches coming together in a co-Reformation. They are trying to merge all of the religions together in September of this year. Now that coincides with what is going on at CERN. So you have the spiritual in lockstep development with the physics world.
Will it is it that clean of an event? Maybe that's a wrong question or the improper way to ask that question, but would it be that clean of an event? The commingling of all world religions on the date certain. Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah. In other words, will there be a definitive declaration from the Vatican?
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't have enough information coming out of the Vatican to say that it will be a definitive declaration, but certainly this is going to be a celebration because of all these jubilees coming together. Now, what comes out of it, I'm not privy to in a factual sense, but in a point of conjecture, I think that will be when they declare a definitive one world religion. That's pure conjecture on my part. I have no facts to back that up.
So, we're time is getting close.
Yeah, I think there are enough signs in the sun and the stars and the moon and whatnot to say that, yeah, we are in that season. And if we're to take, anything from Nostradamus, he's not someone that I'm an adherent to, but he says on September 9th, there will be an alignment that hails or acknowledges the beginning of the Golden Age, which is the fifth age, which is occurring in September. Again, the Hebraic calendar, the new age for them, the new year, starts in September for the year 5778. And that's an alignment in Cancer with the beehive. It's called the M44 beehive constellation in Cancer. Lines up with Jupiter and the sun and the moon on September 23rd. So we have, from the pagan point of view, we have quite a few alignments that are taking place throughout September in the heavens.
Wow. In any way that we can tell these what CERN is running in these high increasing the energy that they use to run their tests. We see the atmosphere in the globe today, this rising division, this hate. Is there a perfect or an ideal atmosphere for these events to come forward? I mean, is there going to need to be, do they need this chaos and division in order to bring about this event that will, try to bring in a false peace? Or is this something that, they just do at any time, and we will fall in line?
Well, I think that if we pay attention to the constellations, not from a pagan perspective, but just acknowledging what going and tracking, then I think we'll have some hints as to what they want to try to accomplish. Will they be successful? It depends on what part of the agenda that you're talking about. I think in Scripture it commands us to pay attention to Israel, and Israel being the timepiece for the events that will unfold here on the earth. So in my mind, what I do is I pay attention to CERN and science in general, and I pay attention to Israel. And we see the latest developments with Netanyahu visiting Washington about, a single state, and Donald Trump, President Trump, saying he's happy with a two-state solution or a single-state solution. Well, for me, what I'm looking for is what will happen in terms of the timetable of the movement of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little choppy, but no, we heard everything you said. And we did see Trump talk about moving the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. We also heard that, it might take a little bit of time. Stan Deo, somebody and who's a guest on our show, said that that's a major step, prophetically, and it's very important to see that.
Is it required in this timeline?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're breaking up a little.
Okay.
What we're doing,
we're
coming up against the break, Anthony. We'll disconnect and reconnect. And hopefully we'll have a better signal, and we'll do that right now, and we'll bring you back before the break.
Yeah.
But again, folks, our guest is Anthony Patch, anthonypatch.com, expert on CERN. I hope you guys can understand some of this stuff better than I can.
Wow. I mean, so we're going through the calendar of CERN as he's laying it out, right?
Yeah. It talked about May 1st, May Day.
Yep, May 8th.
And I don't know if I have this right, Axis Mundi or Mundi. That has to do with that. I had some questions about that. And then also the 23rd of September of this year, which is a planetary alignment.
Right.
For me, personally, I don't put much stock into it other than,
well, I think it's
something to pay attention to.
Right,
it's something to...
Yeah. All right. We got your back.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, look, we've got a near fiber optic connection out of the studio. So I don't know. It could be the weather. It could be a number of different things.
Just
between you and between here and you. Go ahead.
2.5 minutes before the break, Mr. Patch, I want to ask you this: how does CERN play into the mark of the beast?
Well, the mark of the beast is actually more akin to the quantum computers and the sentient world simulation and DNA, third strand DNA. CERN is aligned to that in terms of research into DNA using particle colliders. But the mark of the beast is, in my mind, a combination of third strand DNA and sentient world simulation, which is driven by D-Wave's quantum computers. I'd be happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back from the break, one of the things that you've talked about on our shows in the past and you write about a lot is the D-Wave, the quantum computers. And folks, if you go, you can read a lot about it on Mr. Patch's website under Urgent Discovery.
Right.
You can go to his YouTube videos and check those out. You can listen to his other interviews where he really breaks it down so everybody can grasp what he's saying. And one of the interesting things that he talks about these D-Wave computers is the doubling of their ability and the doubling of their qubits. And whether they say that technology can double in like size and memory every 2 years. Well, they're going, off the deep end here with what they're able to do. And it makes sense that this type of computer system would be perfect for the Mark of the Beast system. Everybody wonders, if it's an RFID chip or barcode on your hand or forehead, just to catalog people, that's one thing. But the mark is it's a mark of worship also, and it's going to do a lot more, and it's going to have to almost have a consciousness about it for it to function the way that I believe the Bible says it does. Because it's not just like a sticker from a piece of fruit you buy at a store that everybody's going to get put on their hand. This thing's going to have be able to do things that normal computers and computer systems, the way we know them today, will not be able to do. And when we get back from the break, we're going to get into that. Folks, go to Anthony Patch's website. Again, I'm going to go over his books. Revising Reality, that's his latest book that he co-authored with friends of ours, Gonzo Shmurna, Josh Peck, Doug Woodward, also Covert Catastrophe, as well as 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, and as well as there's some great interviews he has right on his front page that he's done on CERN, that he's done on his books and the contents of his books, and a number of subjects that surround CERN, from the decoding 4096 key and Antichrist Apollo. I remember we talked about that. Yeah. And the keys to the bottomless pit. And you'd be pretty surprised to see how Mr. Patch describes and shows you what he believes is the actual key. Also want to talk about, when we come back, last time you were on, I believe we talked about a black cube that was part of an internal mechanism of CERN, and how it was like an altar. And I want to kind of get into that a little bit. So when we come back, we're going to continue to talk with Anthony Patch, author, researcher, and speaker, and expert on CERN, and we got a lot more ground to cover, so don't go anywhere. Our guest this evening is Mr. Anthony Patch. His website is anthonypatch.com. We've been covering a lot of ground about CERN. We were talking about the Mark of the Beast before the break, third strand DNA, and quantum computers. Mr. Patch, I want to just throw this out to you. Artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Elon Musk was at a summit recently. Where is it? He was in Dubai. It was the World Government Summit in Dubai that they talked about artificial intelligence. And he made some interesting comments on this. He stated that artificial intelligence is a digital super intelligence that will be like an alien. And he said it's not only possible, it's very probable. And not only that, he wanted to say that these super intelligent aliens are already out there probably observing us. How does artificial intelligence play into CERN and quantum computing?
There you go.
Well, it's a great comment, because for him to say aliens is mirroring what Gordy Rose, one of the co-founders of D-Wave, said. And it's, as you said on my website, there's a lot of information. If you go to my Urgent Discoveries tab at anthonypatch.com, I have several quotes from Gordy Rose, co-founder of D-Wave. One of the quotes is, when you stand next to one of these black cubes, when you stand next to one of these computers, it's like standing at the altar to an alien god. So for Elon Musk to be using the word alien along with Gordy Rose, there's a direct tie to what I think Elon was referring to. He was talking about D-Wave's quantum computers, described as an altar to an alien god by one of their co-founders. Now, Elon Musk also has recently discussed AI in the sense of, if we do not, as humans, stay ahead of the advancements in AI, we will be rendered to the equivalency of a house pet, to a cat.
Huh.
And so that's okay. So he was advancing as his recommendation for how to stay a step ahead of AI is for everyone to be injected through an artery in the arm, what's known as a neural lace. This is actually a material that would flow through the bloodstream directly to the brain and adhere itself as a physical lace to the neurons of our brain, and thus provide us the opportunity to be connected to the AI and ostensibly, he says, stay a step ahead of it.
Wow, that's
okay. I'm not sure. I 100% understand that.
And he goes on to say that over time we're going to see. He says we are already cyborgs due to the extensions of our computers and our phones. And then he goes on to talk about your digital ghost. But he says over time we will see a close merger of biological intelligence and digital intelligence, and it's all about the bandwidth of the brain, the digital extension of yourself. Just what you were describing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. You've had L.A. Marzulli on your show many times. He's a good friend, and I publish a monthly article on his PP&S e-magazine. And one of the articles that I published just recently has to do with exactly what you're talking about, the advancement of the quantum computers as they relate to biology. So I'm going to very quickly run through the advancement of the model numbers of D-Wave's computers, but I'm also going to describe for you what I call warm and wet qubits. Now, D-Wave's computers does not use transistors, it uses quantum bits, known as qubits. They have produced a biological quantum computer that in its first version was compared directly numerically to the number of qubits in a human brain is a quantum computer, quite literally. It's not an analogy. So that if you like, but they exceeded the human brain beyond that to 2 more models. They've exceeded the number of qubits in the human brain with their biological quantum computer. So I'll let you jump in there.
So like you said, we would be reduced to house pets, basically.
Well, yeah.
And this is where you get them calling for, universal wages for everybody because the computers are going to be running everything and humans are going to, be basically obsolete. There's just so many avenues. So many possibilities. And we're talking about CERN. We're talking about the Large Hadron Collider out of Switzerland and, the science behind it. But the stated goals and agenda is completely different from the reality or the revising of the reality, as Mr. Patch's book is titled, of what they really want to do, which is all spiritual in nature. It's satanic in nature.
Right.
And has nothing to do with science other than the fact that they're trying to use quote unquote science to unlock these keys in people of darkness.
Right. Where are we on the calendar? Getting back to again, I 9/23, September 23rd. Got that. Is there more, or is that where it ends? I don't mean to kind of jump around here, but I got a reason for asking this. Is there an extension beyond that? Of course, into December 18th. I understand that from May 8th, like you had talked before, but any other significant hinge point dates on the calendar?
Well, between the 23rd of September and December 18th, on the calendar for CERN, they're going to be running in the north area, that center point of the main ring, what are called xenon physics. Now, xenon physics has to do with a colorless, odorless, poisonous gas. That will be enclosing the environment around the north area target. And that is where they will be resurrecting the DNA. I'm being literal here. The DNA of Osiris, of Nimrod. And this is done utilizing the 4 main detectors at CERN. The 4 main detectors not only look at and measure the collisions that occur between accelerated particles, but if you reverse engineer the design and the components, they are massive 3-story tall MRI machines, like you'd find in a hospital. And that goes directly to DNA sequencing. DNA sequencing means that you develop a digital model of DNA, the sequence of it, the human genome, and thereby, once you have a digital model in a piece of software, you can then resequence that DNA, and utilizing the amino acids and nucleotides, the building blocks of DNA, you can then recreate a biological copy of the original from which the digitized DNA was derived. But you can also, before you resurrect that DNA or reconstitute it using an MRI machine and a sequencer, you can also change that sequence to whatever pattern you want. And create a new biological life form. Now, one last thing, I'll let you jump in. Not only are the detectors an MRI machine, but they are also bioprinters. They are 3D bioprinters for the purpose of reconstituting the DNA as a life form.
That's fascinating. That's what I was going to ask you. It's just basically a 3D printer.
But where did they get the source DNA?
That's my next question. Do they need an ancestor? Do they need original DNA? Or do they just need to know? I guess, how would they know this, the gene sequencing of Osiris from back then today? Is it an ancestor or is it preserved DNA?
One of the reasons we went into Iraq was to retrieve the head of Osiris, which is in a jar, which is containing what they call the sacred fire. And the sacred fire protects the DNA of Osiris. Quite literally, the Vatican has in its possession the head of Osiris in this jar, and it will be transported anywhere between September 9th and September 23rd to the North Area target at CERN, and they will begin the resurrection process.
All right, let me see if I get this straight here. The head of Osiris is in a jar in the Vatican.
Yep.
And where'd this come from? The Iraq, right?
Yep.
Probably from the Baghdad Museum.
I'm sure it wasn't on display. It's got to be pretty gamey by now, right?
Yeah. Now you go to Egypt, the mummies, as I said at the outset of the program. The reason for the preservation of the bodies is for a latter-day resurrection. We're in that latter day. So not only Osiris's DNA, but the DNA of their pharaohs, of their gods, is what they seek to resurrect using these MRI and biological 3D printers. Now, this is all the technology that comes out of, for example, as one person that I've noted in many of my interviews, Dr. Craig Ventnor. His human genome was the first genome that was sequenced, and that was done at Berkeley and in Walnut Creek right next door. And he has founded the Center for Human Longevity. That's in La Jolla, California. He's the one who's developed the tabletop size sequencers. For transmitting DNA, once it's in a digital form, you can transmit it through the cloud to another sequencer and the base chemicals, and you can rebuild that same biological form from which it was originated. And this has been going on, and it's in the literature for over 5 years now, successfully.
Wow.
All right.
Where do we go?
Well,
that's
yeah.
And when talking with you, Mr. Patch, you leave us scratching our heads half the time, wondering where do we go? I mean, how is this? There's just so much that we're covering in it.
But how long would this process? Let me go. I'm still hung up on the head of Osiris and the DNA sequencing and stuff. How long was this going to take? In other words, because I've seen a 3D printer work. It takes a while to kind of print out in 3D whatever you're printing out. So
they don't use quantum computers either.
Well, yeah. But how long is this process going to take?
Just a matter of minutes.
Yeah, that'd be something to see.
Picture a 3D printer that's 3 stories tall, and then extrapolate how long it would take.
Yeah, I guess size does matter, huh?
It does.
No, folks out there, they're familiar with the Illuminati card game. There's a card in that deck of cards. Head in a jar is the name of the card. And inside there, they have a person's head cut off, and there's a jar with liquid, and it looks like there's a machines hooked up to it. But a lot of people will show these cards as they were created decades ago that show like 9/11, the Pentagon attack, and many other catastrophes and things that happened. And just for searching Osiris head in a jar, to see that card pop up, that's pretty amazing.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Well, this is borne out in the hieroglyphs of Egypt. And in my newest book that I'm going to be publishing here very soon, entitled Coalescence, my co-author is Chris from End Times Matrix News. And we have pulled together the actual hieroglyphs that depict what I just outlined for you.
Okay.
No, okay, but see, all right, I'm still hung up. Okay, we gotta go back to this 3D thing and prints it up, and here we go. A matter of minutes, we got, bada bing, what do we got? We got
We
have Osiris. We have Nimrod standing there.
Okay, in the body, in the physical, but what about the spiritual part? Would that be driven by artificial intelligence? Would that be inhabited by Satan, or would that Satan give him the power to be the Antichrist? How would the spiritual aspect play into this?
Well, this is the beast. This is the image of the beast. This is
that's given life.
Satan.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
So we look at September 23rd, and we look at the birthing that's taking place, and I said that is the spirit of the Antichrist. These all coincide.
So on September 24th, we're going to have like a lot to talk about.
We'll have a lot to talk about. I am not going to be dogmatic and say that it's absolutely going to happen then.
No.
I can't do that. I don't have the facts to say it. But there's so much that's coalescing then.
Yeah, and I don't mean to make light of this or pin down the date or anything like that, but what I'm saying is when this does happen, I guess, boy,
it changes everything.
Yeah, it does. So, do the guys, in the white coats, working at the computers, doing the whatever they're doing, thinking whatever they're thinking? I mean, do they know what? I mean, do they know at the end of the, when they push enter or print for P for print, I mean, do they know what they're doing and what's coming, or are they going to be, like, holy crap, what the heck is this?
Well, as we've discussed before, there's a lot of compartmentalization that goes on, but those that are driving the agenda and know how all the pieces fit together know exactly what's happening when they hit enter.
Okay.
Wow.
And just doing some quick searching and reading.
This is the reason the machine power out was built. This is for resurrection. Let's go to, just as a sidestep, just for fun.
All right.
E equals MC squared. E equals MC squared from Einstein. Okay? If you look at that with a different set of glasses on, it is energy being converted into matter. Energy being converted into matter is a resurrection.
Huh?
I understand.
Wait a second. Energy, huh?
Converted into matter to equal a resurrection.
Matter can be neither created nor destroyed.
Well, that is correct, but you can convert it. You can convert energy, and if we talk about the spirits that are in the abyss that do not have a body, they will come through the portal and be converted into matter. They will be resurrected.
Like solar power, wind generators. The wind moves the propellers around and it generates energy. Same basic concept there of turning one form of energy into another.
And we're stepping into the metaphysical discussion here, but the spiritual is energy. It does have an energy form. And when you open a portal to another side, which is a realm of energy, it is not living matter, but you're allowing that spiritual energy to come through, it can be converted through this resurrection process of this technology we're talking about into a physical form.
Wow.
It's what I've talked about on previous shows as digitized DNA, and that's an analogy, but digitized DNA coming through the portal, much like I just described in transporting or transmitting it through the cloud using a sequencer. It's the same process. Resurrection is done through sequencing of DNA.
Right. Okay. I kind of get that, although it makes me feel really ignorant when we're talking about this. I mean, this is talking at several levels above my comprehension, but I kind of understand what you're saying, and I think most people do, at least in theory.
Yeah, I'm trying to take what I read in the journals and make this very simplistic. And we don't have the time to go into a long dialogue about it. That's why I write books, is to give all of the contextual and evidentiary information so people can see it in that context and digest it at their own leisure.
You know, I want to ask you, and I'm being funny. Did you fall and hit your head when you were a kid to, like, get all this? You know how some prodigies, they have head injury and all of a sudden they can play the piano, like, not like Beethoven, okay, or talk French or whatever. I mean, my goodness, this is incredible stuff. And that was not a disparaging comment. That was
No, I don't take it that way.
Yeah, I mean, wow.
I'll give you a flippant response.
Okay.
I was born 2 blocks from UC Berkeley, where the Human Genome Project started. Okay. I have been dropped. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've been dropped into so many things. Let me give you just a quick pebbles on the trail scenario. I was born at Berkeley, which is where they developed the particle accelerators with Dr. Lawrence. That was where they developed the atom bomb with Oppenheimer and Lawrence, okay, and Teller. I grew up in that neighborhood. My father was a general practitioner. His patients, many of whom worked at the Rad Lab up on the hill. When I was 10 years old, I was taken up to on a tour with my father by one of his patients, a physicist who ran the cyclotron. And I walked across the tops of the magnets of the cyclotron as a child. And this is a massive circular ring of magnets. And they were using them for a host of things, but they were developing isotopes for the treatment of cancer, specifically thyroid cancer. And I witnessed a patient being bombarded in his tumor in the neck by the cyclotron in the early days of oncology. So I was immersed in this. Now, Lawrence Livermore Laboratory is a 20-minute drive from where I grew up. The human genome was mapped in Walnut Creek, which is next door to where I grew up. It's the next town over. When I was in the Army, I was in West Germany in the 70s, and I was assigned to nuclear warheads, and that's when I first learned about CERN over the hill in Switzerland. And ever since the 70s, I've been tracking this and studying this as a hobby. And I think I told you in one of my first interviews with you, you asked me, how did I start writing? Well, about late 2012, I literally felt what I would describe as a switch being thrown in the corner of my brain. And the Holy Spirit opened up to me and said, you need to start writing books. You need to start talking about what I've been showing you. That doesn't make me a prophet, and it doesn't make me special. I simply am telling you that since age 16, I have been a witness for Christ. And I've had my ups and downs, but boy, he sure grabbed a hold of me. And he said, you need to start talking about this because you understand it and you can translate it. I've done many years of teaching. And so now that's what I'm doing.
Wow. Yeah, you certainly can translate it. The only thing I can do is just just point to you and say what he said. I'm fooling around a little bit, but because this is heavy stuff, and what you're talking about, I mean, this is really. I mean, what else? What's more important than this? No, I don't want to say assuming. This is happening, right? I mean, this is taking place. It's not it's not a covert agenda anywhere. I mean, it's not covert. It's so people can check this out. Go to anthonypatch.com too, by the way. Revising Reality is his book. Yeah, I can't think of anything more important to talk about than this. That's for sure. Party contestants will receive a year's supply of Rice-A-Roni San Francisco treat. I don't know why I said that. Our guest is Anthony Patch. anthonypatch.com. anthonypatch.com. Just a tremendous wealth of information. Tremendous wealth of information. Go to his website, anthonypatch.com. Revising Reality is the newest book. Grab a hold of that. It's a fascinating read. Here, right back, sir. We got 3 minutes.
All right, we're talking with Anthony Patch. He's been with us since 8 o'clock, being very gracious with his time. He'll be with us and through the end of the show, which is this segment. And we have been talking about CERN. We've been talking about the quantum computing, the black cubes. Where do you want to start, Mr. Patch, with the cubes?
Yeah, let's start with the cube and Saturn just real quickly, and we'll move into the cube as far as the quantum computers at D-Wave are concerned. Doug, several interviews I have cited your comment to me about your conversation with an intelligence community contact relative to the cube and Saturn. Yes. And I appreciate that because that provides some, cross-referencing to the cube. But specifically, and I haven't divulged this before, but the construct, what that cube is made of, and that is metallic hydrogen. That's the core of Saturn, is metallic hydrogen. It's under such incredible pressure that it actually forms hydrogen, normally a gas, into a metal. A representation of that is...
I've actually seen this before. I've seen that happen. Not in large quantities, but a very small, very, very intense compression, very small quantity. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. In the laboratory, it's produced that way, sure. But if we want to go to the quantum computers, the latest news in D-Wave computing is they sold in January of this year to Temporal Defense Systems the model 2000Q. That means it has 2,000 qubits in this computer. Now, previous to that, they had the 1024 and the 512. The 512 has been the most prolific model sold, which went to Lockheed, USC, Google, Amazon, and the NSA Processing Center, data center in Utah. So the 2000Q is actually the 2048 model, 2048 qubits, but they just call it the 2000, just like the 1024 model that they sold to the NSA and to Google. They each received the 1024 model. They only called it the 1000 qubit. They're kind of funny with what they released to the public, but those are the actual numbers. So Temporal Defense Systems, and they are involved in cryptology and the protecting of secret transmissions. So there's a lot more behind that, but I just wanted to give you a quick update on what they're doing. I'm going to jump real quickly because of time to what I referred to earlier as the warm and wet qubits. That is a quantum computer that has 65,536 qubits. That number is significant, but because 65,536 is the exact same number in the human brain, in a neuron, in a microtubule of what are known as tubulin dimers, D-I-M-E-R-S. Tubulin dimers are arranged in pairs, a 0 and a 1. They are the quantum qubits of the human brain, therefore a quantum computer. The tubulin dimers are binary, the same way that qubits are binary in a quantum computer. Therefore, D-Wave modeled the number of tubulin dimers in a microtubule, and the microtubules make up the human neurons. They have a computer, biological, comprised of calcium, phosphorus, and oxygen, forming tubulin dimers in the equivalent number as the tubulin dimers in the human brain. They literally have a biological computer. I'll let you jump in there.
To what end? I mean, a biological computer.
Artificial intelligence and sentience.
Okay.
And
yeah, it's the AI, and this is the system. This is the system that is running the present-day sentient world simulation. It is a sentient simulation of our environment. It is the living, breathing matrix.
And this is talked about in Scripture in different ways. In Daniel, and Mr. Patch, we're going to have to reconnect with you because the video is kind of very spotty, and the audio is choppy.
Go figure, right? I mean,
So we're going to disconnect and connect right now. But in Daniel, I believe it's 242. So let me check, make sure. It's in chapter 2 somewhere. It talks about how they will try to cleave. Okay. That humans, the angels or Nephilim, will try to cleave with humans, but they will not be successful in the end times. And this is when the description is being given of Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the different kingdoms. And it says about that, how they will try to cleave to one another, but they will not be able to mingle. And when we're talking about the recreation of a biological entity, that the Antichrist, Nimrod or Osiris reborn, I mean, to me, that's just, it's amazing. And what's even more amazing is, if you do some research on this, there are arguments that people like Gary Stearman have made. Tom Horn has written a book about this, and there are lots of theories, and I say theories backed up by Scripture and scriptural interpretations about how this could happen and how even the Scriptures lay it out. And it's very eye-opening. One thing we do know is that as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days in the coming of the Son of Man, when Jesus returns, before Jesus returns. We know there's going to be the mark of the beast, the one world Antichrist kingdom will be here, and Jesus will crush it upon his return. All these things were foretold in the Bible. And when we look at this from a biblical and a scriptural perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Now, there's a lot of theories on how it could happen or which way it can happen, but I think we can all agree that CERN is being used as the primary tool to make this happen, not only to merge the spiritual world with the physical world, but to bring back this Antichrist kingdom with the keys to the bottomless pit being the key opening the bottomless pit to release these entities with the Antichrist.
Yes, CERN is the key to the bottomless pit, one by location over the bottomless pit, but two in conjunction with the quantum computers from D-Wave, because the key is a cryptological key, and you have to break Shor's algorithm 2048 and 4096 in order to break that cryptological key. That's why the key to the bottomless pit that's given to the angel is a code, and you have to break the code with a
This is Tim Clark with End Times Matrix News with Chris and our special guest, Anthony Patch. Hi, how are you all doing today?
I'm doing good. Hi,
go.
Anthony.
Hey, Chris and Tim. It's great to be back together with you guys. Thanks for the invite.
So today we're going to be combining research Chris just came across with the 4096 code and how that contributes to our overall understanding of what Anthony has been working on recently. Could you start us off with the 4096 material?
I came up with this mathematically, just as the progression of the model numbers of D-Wave's adiabatic quantum computers. 4096 represents an adiabatic quantum computer that operates on qubits. 4096 is the number of qubits within this computer. I sent that to you guys, as I do most of my research when I think it's pertinent to what you're looking at, and you blew me away. Absolutely, I had no idea the ramifications of that number in terms of the cosmos, the entities, the planetary alignments, and the literal translation of 4096. So let's just kind of recap a little bit, because I recall your video that the two of you produced. And what struck me is what you said, 4096 is related directly to Shiva. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So for the benefit of myself as well as the audience, can you break down that relationship just a little bit more? Can you tell me, does 4096 translate to Shiva in some form? What do you see the relationship between 4096 and Shiva to be?
Well, I think it's the same story about the gamble that Thoth did with Sin, the moon god, in order to gather 5 days for Osiris, Nephthys, Set, and Isis to be born. And that is the birth. That is the resurrected Saturn. Then there was the Ogdo. They represent 4 frogs and 4 snakes. They are gods of the dead. And Orion, when there is a cycle of the sun and the moon, and they connect at a certain time together, that is when they do a lot of their rituals. And I think that Nostradamus said when the moon and the sun and Jupiter is lined up, that's when the 5th age begins, and that's 9/23/2017. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the 5th age is going to start that day, but I'm just saying that it is in reference to what he predicted a long time ago.
So we know that Shiva, it has 3 stages: destruction, then a wasteland or a level playing field, a clean sheet of paper, we might call it, and then the rebirth. So what I hear you saying is there's a resurrection of Saturn that is represented both by Shiva and by 4096. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Because that's what we're talking about in the physics end of it, where we talk about the electrical reconnecting of Earth to Saturn by way of the Birkeland currents, the plasma conduit that we've talked about so often, that it'll be generated by the Large Hadron Collider. And this is something that a lot of people have emailed me back, and even people that have interviewed me have struggled with, and I've struggled with it as well. Being able to really pinpoint some evidence, some factual evidence, both historically, as you're doing when you're talking about the Ogdode and you're talking about the sun and the moon and Jupiter and Orion, but being able to take it to the present time and say, we have a computer that is labeled the 4096, which translates to Shiva in a certain respect and represents the resurrection of Saturn. And then you toss in the 4 frogs, the 4 demonic entities. The reason that I'm focusing on this is because this really can crystallize the discussion about why are they focused on Saturn, why do they worship Saturn, and why do they want a stronger electrical connection. And just for the sake of the audience, the 3 of us have talked about the electric model of the universe for a couple of years now, and all of the planets are electrically connected. There is a plasma that exists in what mainstream science calls the vacuum of space, or dark matter, dark energy, is actually electric plasma, charged ionized gas. And through that medium, which is conductive, all of the planets are still electrically connected to one another. It has been my premise that one of the principal agendas with the Large Hadron Collider at CERN is to establish a stronger electrical connection between Saturn and the Earth for the purpose of opening the gateway to the abyss.
Isn't the ancient world's term for this type of phenomenon the ether?
Yes. There's two camps in terms of the model of the universe and how, from a physics standpoint, how the universe operates. And one is we might call Einstein and the gravity model, the theory of relativity. And in that camp is the discussion of dark matter and dark energy, which, according to mainstream science, comprises about 96% of the known universe, only 4% of which is what we interact with on a daily basis. So 4% is what we see in the heavens, in the cosmos, in our reality here. And the rest they've assigned this dark matter, dark energy to. But they've done that only from a theoretical standpoint because it's never been measured, never been detected. Let's start there. Never been detected, never been measured, and never been reproduced experimentally in the laboratory. Therefore, dark matter, dark energy remains only a theory on the chalkboard, so to speak. Now, the other camp is that what we've called the Tesla camp, the electric model of the universe. And this is derived from the research of scientists that are participating in a project called the Thunderbolts Project. And I'm not a spokesman, we are not spokespersons, but we paraphrase their research. And in the electric model, the void, the dark matter and dark energy, if you will, is actually ionized gas or a plasma, the fourth state of matter. And that plasma exists throughout at the quantum level and the macro and the cosmological level. And it is charged with electricity. And therefore the name, the electric model of the universe, that everything is electrically connected and electrically communicates with each other, including the planets, people, atoms, and quantum particles.
So we're talking about Tesla's research into the electric universe, and we're talking about your research connecting it to 4096. That's built off of Shor's algorithm. It's where we're going from your previous information. Could you explain Shor's algorithm and how the 4096 led to your research about the abyss and the encryption?
Yeah, that's a great place to jump off to a little bit of history as to D-Wave's adiabatic quantum computers. These are interdimensional computers. And this isn't me making this up. This is all public information that they put out, that D-Wave puts out. It operates at the quantum level interdimensionally. It accesses what are described as parallel universes. The first model was the 128. That represents the number of qubits rather than transistors, qubits that operate this computer. First one was sold to USC and Lockheed Martin as a joint project at USC for a quantum computer lab, and the name of that computer they have assigned to it is called Rainier, like Mount Rainier. The second model was the 512, and that was called Chimera. Then D-Wave 2 came out last year, which is also a 512, and it is called Vesuvius. And that particular model, the Vesuvius, went to the Quantum Artificial Intelligence Lab at NASA's Advanced Supercomputing Division of Ames Research Center. And it is used for research into machine learning or artificial intelligence. There's also a Vesuvius in Utah. They have a massive data center there, and one of the 512s, the D2 model 512 Vesuvius, is in Utah. The third model came out February of last year in 2015 called a 1024, and that went to Google. Now this is all public information. That 1024 was actually operating on a chip, if you will, on an assembly that held not 1024 qubits, but actually 2048 qubits, and they only operated half of that, let's call it a chip. They only operated half of that chip at the 1024 level. Now that 1024 is artificially intelligent, and it is equivalent to the processing power of over 7 billion human brains. Each human brain processes at any given moment about 1 petaflop of data. A petaflop. So they then moved from the 1024 to the 2048. Now the 2048, I'll relate to Shor's algorithm in a moment, but they have not publicly disclosed the model 2048. That is the model that is connected to CERN. That is the model that will be initially operating to open the portal, but it is not the only model. There's a second model, the 4096, which will actually be responsible for the opening of the portal in conjunction with the 2048. So it'll actually be 2 computers operating. Now, let's take 2048. That relates to a mathematical algorithm called Shor's algorithm. This was considered a series of numbers that covered a full sheet of paper. It would require, according to Shor, a quantum computer to determine all of the prime numbers, the factors, to find the actual prime numbers within this long algorithm. He said that it would take a transistor-based quantum computer when he made that statement. He had no knowledge of qubits and the adiabatic quantum computer. This was in the 90s.
Right.
So one of the principal goals to test whether their adiabatic quantum computer using qubits was operating properly, D-Wave sought to find all of these prime numbers in the 2048 algorithm. Now I'm going to get to why this is important real quick. They were successful using their qubit-based quantum computer in finding all of the prime numbers in that algorithm for the first time. That rendered all secret codes, if you will, for communications on the planet were now rendered obsolete and vulnerable to being read by the adiabatic quantum computer model 2048, because all of the code systems in the world are based upon, in the RSA coding system, were based upon the idea that no computer existed that could crack Shor's algorithm. Once the 2048 cracked that, well, I shouldn't say the 2048 specifically, it actually happened with the model 128. So I'm confusing people, but the very first model 128, all the way through the progressions, they now can read all of the secret codes that are written based upon the theory that 2048 could not be cracked. And all of those RSA-based cryptological forms of communication were rendered obsolete, as I said, and that's when the NSA got really excited. They've been right there at lockstep with D-Wave all the way from their initial formative years with DARPA. But the point here is, and this will pull into 4096 in a moment, the point is our intelligence agencies realized that they could read everybody else's secret communications around the planet. But on top of that, they now had a system for coding communications that unless you had an adiabatic quantum computer based on qubits, not on transistors, you could not read this new form of cryptological communication. So our intelligence agencies, thanks to D-Wave, have an absolutely secure form of communication that cannot be read by anyone else. So they have a light years ahead, a quantum leap, if you will, advanced lead on secure communications. Now they've gone from the 2048 to the 4096. This is called Rose's Law in the world of D-Wave. Gordy Rose is one of the founders of the company. You know, in Moore's Law, they talk about transistors advancing, doubling their power every 18 months. Well, Rose's Law is qubits double every 12 months. Well, that has advanced to the point where the qubits double every 3 months.
Oh boy.
This led me to the mathematical progression of their model numbers to 4096. 4096 is where we're at today that we're talking about. Now, the 2048 has not been publicly disclosed by D-Wave, and certainly the 4096 has never been disclosed by anyone. But it's a natural progression of Rose's law that I come up with that number, and I pass that number on to you guys, not only because it represents a secret code form of communications, cryptological communication, but it also represents the code that needs to be cracked to literally turn the key. It is the key in Scripture, in Revelation. It is the actual key. The key, just like in cryptology, in order to write something in a coded language and then decipher it, you must, at the beginning and the end, have a key to write the code and then decode it at the opposite end. In order to crack the key, the code, to open the bottomless pit, you must have the key. The key is the breaking down of the 4096 algorithm. Just like Shor's algorithm 2048, it's more advanced than Shor's algorithm. It's an algorithm of prime numbers, of factors, that has to be cracked. And once you have the prime numbers, you now have the code to open the bottomless pit, which is where CERN lives.
I had two ways of imaging that image that you gave the first time when I heard that. One was in the movie setting type of image where the safe crackers come along and put their little gadget on the thing, and you watch it run down the little numbers until it hits the final number, and then pop, the lock opens. And the second one fits more with quantum physics, where when they're feeding an algorithm through to the other side, that fourth dimension, and receiving feedback back, I actually thought of it more in the sense of when they're doing launch codes for nuclear weapons, and you have the two guys standing there with the keys, and they have to do it at the same time. Well, if one of those guys was on the other side with the key on the other side, and they both turn the keys, one from one side and one from the other, then that magically unlocks the quantum lock. And that's how I visualize what you were saying, is that it's the collaboration between man willingly opening up hell and the abyss, and the demonic inspirers of these men on the other side opening it up at the same time.
I think that's a relevant analogy. I definitely think it's relevant, because let's back up a little bit. And I know Chris is going to have some information here real quick, but I'm going to back up real quick. Gordy Rose, and this is on my website, by the way, anthonypatch.com. If you go to Urgent Discoveries, the first tab of Urgent Discoveries, I have all this laid out, so I'm going to make it very quick for the sake of the video here. But when you look at the model 512, that's about 500 qubits. Gordy Rose says, I'm going to read it real quick here. And when you increase the number of these devices, in other words, qubits, every time you add one of these qubits, you double the number of parallel universes that you have access to, until such time you get to a chip like this, which is about 500 of these bits, something like 2 to the 500th power of these guys living in that chip. He's talking about the number of parallel universes that they're accessing using this interdimensional computer. Now I'm going to jump from 512, 500, 2 to the 500th power, and go to the 4096 and relate it to what you just said about the other side. And they are accessing 2 to the 4,000th power.
Wow.
That's the number of parallel universes, 2 to the 4,000th power of universes they're accessing. Remember, over a year ago, I said when they open this portal, it's going to be like a freeway of demonic entities coming through.
I can already feel that it's coming.
Well, think about 2 to the 4,000th power number of parallel universes simultaneously accessed by the combining of the adiabatic quantum computer 4096 with the Large Hadron Collider. And therefore, you have a massive conduit allowing energy and entities to come in to our frame of reference, our realm.
What's your take on this arch of triumph that they're setting these portals of entry around its globe? Is there something other than conquering that territory in the name of the deity of the thing you're planting there? Is there some kind of portal connection here with portals and entry points? What's your speculation? I know you can't really say for sure, but
I think they're targets. I do think that they are targets for these entities to be distributed. If we look at this from the standpoint of a computer that is aiding and abetting to the opening of this portal, and that, as I have said, digital information and digitized DNA, more specifically, will come through that portal, then we can look at it in a digital distribution network.
Yes.
And that these gateways represent computer nodes, computational nodes, in which the distribution of this DNA, digitized DNA, and these spiritual entities coming through will then be distributed around the planet. There will be over 1,000 of these archways placed around the world.
These are nodes. You're looking at them as some kind of digitized transfer pathway for demonic entities once the highways kind of open up, and it's a distribution network of some sort.
I really do, and I'm going to tell you where I leaped that off from, and that is from the Sentient World Simulation, SWS. SWS exists. This is a mirror of our reality. There is a complete virtual reality model of the entire planet within the adiabatic quantum computer systems. Every person on the planet is represented as a node. That's their own language.
Wow. I didn't know that.
There are over 7 billion nodes
wow.
that are real-time tracked around the planet in this sentient world simulation, which is an artificially intelligent run system, which D-Wave's computers operate. And this is a project that was first proposed in 2006 out of Purdue University. I have their draft document. They, in 2007, made a public announcement that they were going live with the sentient world simulation. Sentient meaning self-aware, obviously artificially intelligent. Again, this is a way for, one, the artificially intelligent computer can self-learn about human behavior. This is a psychological operation, meaning that they are able to predict human behavior, and therefore they can advance their agenda ahead of the reaction time by the world's population. When we look at things like the Mandela effect is a psyops. When we look at things like the discussion and debate of the flat earth, when we look at things like Jade Helm.
Isn't this the launching, what you're talking about, the AI 7 million node modeling of humanity? I kind of connect that to the whole Jade Helm thing.
And it is 7 billion.
7 billion.
7 million.
Sorry, billion.
Yeah. Jade Helm was one of the first public manifestations of an artificially intelligent, simulated military operation. And the purpose of this was to test the psychological response by people around the world, not just in the United States, but how people would respond to a military operation like this. And this was no bullets, no shots fired.
Right.
But this was a full-on tabletop exercise taken out into the public arena and run real time by an artificially intelligent system. This is one example that I can give you of the sentient world simulation in real time, in physical form, playing out. Go to Purdue University 2006 sentient world simulation, it'll pop right up. So it's no big deal, but it's understanding the ramifications of this that's really important. So we're looking at the beast system,
right?
SWS. We're looking at the computer system that will be able to control every person on the planet, including, as it says in Scripture, the ability to buy and sell. real time using the adiabatic quantum computer with the now more than the equivalent processing power of 7 billion human brains. It's way beyond that. That was the model 2048.
Yeah.
Let me give people a tangible touch point. When the first adiabatic quantum computer came out, the 128, it could process in 10 seconds a problem that would take a transistor-based quantum computer 30,000 years to solve.
Jeez, my goodness.
You can't even wrap your head around it.
No, you can't
It's
even contemplate those kinds of numbers, not at all.
And it's interdimensional.
You know what hit me when you said the word node and humans and nodes? From the Christian perspective, we are spiritual vessels for the Holy Spirit to indwell. We are the temples that the Lord indwells as believers in Christ. To actually call a person a node is almost like calling them a vessel, whether they're empty vessels or spiritually dead vessels in the sense of how we were born into creation spiritually dead, but they're still nodes or vessels that could be possessed or however they're going to go about this thing with the mark of the beast. But to call people nodes of all things.
This goes back to the early stages, the early development in the world of MK Ultra and the ability to control people psychologically, mentally, and physically. This all folds into the beast system. Everything, all of this, you said this before we went on the air, the science fiction writers haven't got anything on the Bible. It's all in the Bible already. And you said it better than I did, so I'll have you repeat that.
Sure. We were talking about an upcoming project that Anthony's involved with, releasing with Douglas Woodward, Gon Shimura, and I believe it's Josh Peck. They all did a project together. I've been privileged to be able to read ahead of time and just give some feedback on it. And I said, I came up with a snappy one-liner for your book. If you want to use it, I said, sci-fi can only dream of going where the Bible's already been.
I hear a little twinge of Star Trek in there.
Yes, it's true. It has a Star Trek-y kind of feel to it, but the Bible was already there. It's like when I'm explaining to my nephew, I said, you know where Star Wars happened? Star Wars happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. You didn't know it was written back then, did you?
That is beautiful. See, that's what I mean. You have a whole different area of research than I do. And Chris, the Trinity that we have going on here that is amazing. I just love when you bring stuff like that in.
We're going to get Chris now. Yeah, she's back.
Okay.
Jump in.
Go ahead.
4096 basically is the capstone. And we know that the capstone also represents the coming of the Antichrist, because in the Bible, the cornerstone was changed to capstone, and that represents Lucifer, Apollo. We know that Apollo is underneath CERN, and they want to resurrect him. I do believe the Tower of Babel is the casket of Osiris. His head is in the casket. It is an alchemy machine with lapis lazuli and gold. It's harmonic, it's electric, and I do believe they are going to use that to raise the Antichrist. The Ganesh, which is translated to 4096, is the Om. 4096 is exactly Saturn, Venus, and Jupiter Trinity, which is the sun and the moon and the resurrected Saturn. Because when we're talking about Ganesh, which is the elephant, he is the son of Shiva, which is Shiva, because it's the same thing with Nimrod. When he's killed, then he's the resurrected Nimrod as Tammuz, because Semiramis is the moon, Nimrod is the sun, Tammuz is the sun and the moon both. It's a split deity of male and female, sun and moon. And this has to do with the cycles of the sun and of the moon. And when we're talking about the 4 that represents the solidness of the capstone, which is Kudum, which is Jupiter, Sobek, which is Saturn, he's the Z-pinch. Isis, which is Venus, the female aspect of Saturn, and Horus, the sun, that is the resurrected Saturn as Ra. And we know that Set and Horus, they were always battling each other in order to gain the throne. And so one represents the sun and one represents the moon. And so that's the Trinity of what they want to resurrect is the Trinity. That's why Shiva put the head of the elephant on Ganesh. When he castrated it, he put it back on.
the intelligence system, the operating system, the intelligence link up. That's why it was interesting to me was the Ganesh aspect of 4096 was the capstone on top of the pyramid, which was the Eye of Lucifer, which is the intelligence running the whole thing. And I was going, do you think, this is a hypothetical, of course, since we were covering the head transplant story, and we reported that in the previous video, but do you think that the opening of the pit with the encryption key is the putting the capstone on event as far as their signaling with Ganesh, kind of like a hardwiring the capstone intelligence system in place through the opening of the abyss? Or is there anything to communicate that the abyss opening is the hardwiring of the elephant intelligence capstone system?
It's the brain. It's the consciousness. That's why there was 2 trees in the garden. There was a tree of life and a tree of consciousness. And those that are not listening to God, that are in the consciousness of Satan through hell and all of his demons and his deity, those are the ones that are going to be encrypted into the computer, into 4096. Now, those that are awake in Christ, they will not be encoded. They will not be lost forever into the abyss of Saturn and this cryptic key.
Anthony, as the node connection to this, I want to connect it to the nanodust. Now, we've been ingesting nanodust and all the particulates in the atmosphere for a long time now. Are we going to operate, I'm just saying hypothetically again, are we going to operate like some kind of crystalline receiver for this elephant head capstone system when it goes online, that we all become nodes or receivers of some sort?
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark with that, because that's a purposeful pun, the mark. This is the mark. Yeah, this is the mark of the beast system. Now, we have free will. We'll start with that. We have the choice to either accept the mark or reject it. If we accept it, it means that the nanoparticles that are within all of our bodies right now that are in a dormant state, we have said, we've given permission for the activation of those nanoparticles. And they are going to change our DNA. This is a conversation we've had before. Going to change our DNA, and therefore also change the way that our minds operate. People will lose their awareness that they have even been changed when this happens.
Wow.
And the sales pitch, if you will, is that if you accept the mark of the beast, then you will achieve immortality, that you will no longer have diseases, you'll have longevity. This is the whole mantra in Silicon Valley. If you follow the money, the venture capital money in Silicon Valley, it is all going into human longevity, the defeating of death, the immortality, the original lie that ye shall be as gods. This is where it's all going. So the sales pitch is, you will be immortal if you accept the mark of the beast, and you'll be able to buy and sell and all those things that are in Scripture. But the point is, it's done by free will. Now, those of us with the Holy Spirit, those that stay close to Christ, those that stay focused on Christ, will understand that there's a game afoot, and that this is the grand deception, and that when you are offered this, you will reject it. In the interim, I believe that the DNA is actually shielded by the Holy Spirit, the full armor of God as it's described.
Right.
The full armor of God will protect our DNA from being activated. And from a physics standpoint, the activation of those nanoparticles is done through electromagnetic stimuli. More specifically, it's done through microwaves. And this microwave connection exists through our Wi-Fi, through our interconnecting, not just by the internet, because the internet really is an obsolete system. The sentient world simulation operates not in an internet-based way, it operates in a full spectrum. In other words, all of the electromagnetic energy that surrounds the Earth no matter its frequency, no matter what radio spectrum or microwave spectrum. This is full spectrum dominance, as it's called in the military. Full spectrum dominance of all of the electromagnetic signals around the planet means that we're immersed,
right,
not just in a Wi-Fi environment, but in an electromagnetic environment. This is something that they don't want people to consciously understand, is that this is an electric universe. This is why we go back to talking about Einstein versus Tesla.
Right.
The reason that they
Yeah.
talk about dark matter, dark energy is so that people don't realize that we are immersed in an electrical environment, and they will use that electrical environment to change our DNA and to change our DNA, but the Holy Spirit interferes with that.
I had mentioned to Chris this Tesla type stuff, and I said, when you look at and you hear people explain how they create Tesla coils, what makes us not a node Tesla coil just walking around on the surface that we are Tesla coils, in the sense that we are surrounded by all this stuff being bombarded, and we're having that whole kind of electrical connection like those Tesla coils have. You got the two poles, one, our feet are on the ground, we're grounded, and our head's in the air, and we're getting bombarded by this whole thing. Is that what they're trying to do? 7 billion nodes of Tesla coils out there, you know?
Sure.
And I think the Twin Towers, when they went down, they became the Freedom Tower of one, the combination of your 288s there. And now the Triumph Arch of Baal going up there is kind of like the icing on the cake in my book. It's already designated that they triumphed over this nation, and now they're going to have a portal there saying this is the final icing on the cake.
So if Jupiter is Baal, and they're putting up arches of Baal all over the world, and they represent gates and sacrifices also. Baal is Jupiter. The Lord of Jubilee is Thoth. He is the one who bursts the Ogdode, which is the capstone. He's also Quetzalcoatl, and the Mayans say that he is going to come back now. We are in the time of the capstone. 2016 is when he is supposed to return.
Okay.
So Quetzalcoatl is also Thoth. He's also Hapu. And in Egypt, which is the god of the Nile. The Nile is the river in the sky, or the serpent in the sky. November 20th is when Jupiter goes into the womb. Interestingly, Mercury is Hermes. He's also Thoth. Mercury is the messenger god of the night. And he is the one that's supposed to transfer the souls to the dead. Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, which Jupiter will be born. And he also is member of the spirit of all these planets. He's the Antichrist spirit. And he also is the ruler of the Gemini twins. The Gemini twins represent the two pillars, the sun and the moon, Set and Horus, Apollo and Hermes. And that's why I think CERN was built over Apollo's temple, in order to resurrect Apollo, because he's Apollyon. He's the Antichrist. He's the sun god. And the Bennu bird burst the sun in order to create the Ogdode in history, and that's the resurrected Saturn. The head is not attached to the body, which is the capstone, and the capstone is Saturn. It is 4096. It is the Ohm. It is the Saturn-Venus Jupiter combination, because if you look at all the planets, the 7, which Shiva is 7 planets. So if you look at all the 7 planets, they equal Saturn. And that's why they say Ogdode of the 8, because he's the 8. And I try to get out what I'm trying to think, Anthony, and it's so hard. It's like, the capstone is Saturn. They want to put Saturn on the body. They want to connect Saturn with Earth, male and female, Inky, male, female. And they called Saturn heaven, and they called him the sun god, and they worshipped him as God, as Lucifer. So this is what they want to happen again, except this time they built this machine here, CERN, in this quantum 4096 computer, which is the connection of this Wi-Fi, because I think that they are building this up until they can make that connection to Saturn, until a certain alignment, and they can ignite Saturn as the sun, and to be able to rule over the Earth and connect to all of the planets are his body. So he has to connect to all of them and to take control and to rule the world. And that's why Jesus is coming. He's coming to save his children and to take us out of the deception and to bring us to home, to heaven, where we will live forever.
Well, we spoke last year about their intent is to recreate their mythological, I want to underscore mythological, golden age of Kronos. Kronos being Saturn, being the previous sun, the primordial sun by which time was measured. The myth is that Mars, Saturn, and the Earth were encapsulated within a plasma envelope, and that plasma envelope sustained all life. There was no darkness. There actually, in this construct, there was no time because there was no day or night. Saturn was the sun to a man-inhabited Earth during this golden age of Kronos. And Saturn, the Earth, and Mars traveled together within this envelope through the cosmos, entered our solar system, and not gravitationally, but electromagnetically was attracted by the sun and captured into its present orbit, and that caused a massive disruption of the orbits of the planets and, the birthing of planets. So to encapsulate that into what you're saying, if they are trying to reignite Saturn, they're actually trying to reignite the plasma, recreate the plasma envelope surrounding Saturn that existed during this golden age of Kronos. Now, whether or not the plutonium on Cassini will prove to be the match that's struck, there's some debate about that, only because the quantities of plutonium are very small. They're used for maintaining the electronics. They're literally heaters, atomic heaters, and they're encapsulated in lead compartments, and they're separate compartments. And the quantity of plutonium actually is quite small. It produces enough heat to maintain the electronics so that they don't freeze. But I think the Cassini is more of a target. I think it is being provided as a pinpoint target at Saturn, to which the Large Hadron Collider will then produce a Birkeland current, a twisted helix of two charge state pathways that will then connect to Cassini as the target at Saturn and connect the two planets. But as you're saying, Saturn is one of the 8 planets, and if we look at the Kabbalah as the model, as you have shown me in the past, I think that they're looking at electrically reconnecting the planets. Now, that's a statement that we've talked about before last year, but electrically reconnecting the planets in a more profound way than they exist today. That alignment, I think, is what we need to focus on. And again, we've talked about trying to determine alignments. And I think that you're hitting on something here. When you talk about November 20th of this year and the birthing of a new king, the last Jubilee, the 5777, I think that's significant. But I think that as we move into August of 2017, as you've pointed out, you're talking there about Jupiter in the womb and the Virgo, the last Jubilee, November 20th of this year, 2016, and then August 21st, the solar eclipse, the 5777. That may be what the Pope is preparing the one world religion system for. And then next year, reconnecting of the planets and the opening of the portal. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that sounds just about right. You mentioned Saturn and the envelope of plasma and Mars and the Earth. Well, Mars is Marduk, and he's Shamash, and he's Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain's the artificer of iron, which is Mars, and brass, which is Venus, and copper, the elements. Venus is phosphorus also. The moon that Thoth negotiated with to birth the Ogdoad is the father of Shamash, which is Mars in mythology.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk,
and Mars is the god of war.
Yes, and that's what they need is chaos in order to get the false peace. That's why they call it order out of chaos. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Vatican and all of the world leaders, they worship the order of the seraphim. They're the fallen angels. Thoth is a fallen angel. He's Hermes. There's different names for him, of course. It'll be in our book, CERN Unos's box that Tim and I are writing.
Mm-hmm.
This is who they worship, and you're correct. They are preparing for a new king, which is Satan, which is Lucifer, because Jupiter is Baal, and he is going to be birthed September the 23rd of 2017. And I thought that it was a possibility that the gate was going to open August the 21st of 2017 because of the solar eclipse and the 88 degree representing the DNA of Shiva, mm-hmm. which is the father of the Ogdoad. Shiva also represents Lord Ayappa, which is in the Hindu religion. He is Ptah and Imhotep in Egyptian. So he is part of that deity, and that is part of that bloodline with Egypt. And he came from India, Imhotep did.
That's interesting.
Which is Ptah, and remember, he represents Mars.
Yeah, from India. I didn't know Imhotep was. So let's recap for the audience. Now we're talking about this year. November 20th of this year is the last Jubilee. Is that right?
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it, that Mercury rules Virgo and he's the Lord of Jubilees?
Mercury does, huh?
Yes. He rules the Gemini twins, too. And he is one of the Gemini twins also. Hermes and Apollo are the Gemini twins.
Okay. So November 20th, he's placed in the womb. And then he's birthed on the 23rd of September next year.
Right. And Hermes Thoth, he represents the Bennu bird, and he is the one who burst the egg of the Ogdoad, of the capstone, of the sun.
Now, the egg you mentioned was August 21st of 2017, the eclipse, the shape of the egg moving across the U.S.
Yes.
At the 88th parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of a forewarning of the birth, of the imminent birth on the 23rd of September?
I think that's when some sort of gate opens up. I don't know which gate, but I solely believe that there's a gate that is going to be opened during that time.
And again, that goes back to the 88th parallel, the double H's.
So, Anthony, where do we go with the 4096? And do we know if the capstone is back on the pyramid prior to the abyss opening or after the abyss opening? Or is the abyss opening the event that puts it up there? Do we have any insight on any of those things?
Well, yeah, I think that they had to create the head, and I'm glad that 4096 translates to Ganesh, because that makes a whole lot of sense when Chris explains it that way, and that it relates over to Shiva, which the statue of Shiva, as people probably already know, resides at CERN, right outside their headquarters building, their administration building. You know, there is this spiritual aspect to the physical that we continue to repeat, saying that you can't separate the physical from the spiritual. I think to answer your question about the head of the pyramid, I think if we're figuratively talking about an organizational structure that is a pyramid with the lack of a head, the lack of a leader, they have the organization, they have the body, in other words, the secret societies, et cetera, are the body of the pyramid in an organizational chart. And unfortunately, it has been lacking a leader. But they have been building their structure, building their pyramid organizational chart in anticipation of the return of their leader. And whether that's the Mahdi coming out of the well or the Antichrist, however you want to label that, but literally they have created the head, which is a computer, which is the Model 4096A diabatic quantum computer made by D-Wave Corporation, which is artificially intelligent. And the head has been placed at the top of the organizational chart in the form of an artificially intelligent computer that is self-aware, it is sentient. It is the head of the organization now, and it is what is running the sentient world simulation. And that simulation is simply the template, the beginning point for the Antichrist to be able to use that infrastructure of the SWS, use that infrastructure as the beast system. So I do believe that the head has been manufactured.
Okay.
And it is now running the elites. It is now running the body of the pyramidal organizational chart. It is running things.
Yeah. It's the AI system already in place, which makes a lot of sense because we talk about the worshiping of the image of the beast and then all the holographic stuff that we're suspecting will be these little holographic images popping up for people to worship, as in the days of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon and the golden statue.
Well, I meant to mention for you, the popular culture part of it is the Pokemon Go, augmented reality. Now, that is a part of the sentient world simulation placed in an app for people to become accustomed to using, to the extent that they will demand the augmented digital reality, the virtual reality, if you will, but I like to call it the augmented reality, demand the digital rather than the analog, that they want to be full-time, fully immersed in this new sentient world simulation that Pokemon Go is just the cracking of the doorway for people, so that they will become to the point of saying, I like the augmented reality better than the analog, and thereby deceiving people and capturing them within this world that has been created by the 4096 and run by the 4096.
That's why the CIA created that app.
Yep.
As another kind of a Jade Helm experiment to see what the masses, how they would react to
Correct.
such things, so they could tweak it
Yep.
and game the population to see if they can smooth out the kinks.
And that's the key word. I've been repeating this on a couple of other shows. There is a game afoot. You hit it right on the head, my friend. We are being gamed. We are being played. Now, fortunately, we have the Holy Spirit to give us that ability to put on the new glasses of the Holy Spirit and see things clearly and see the game, see the chessboard. The SWS is the chessboard, and we can see it, and we can choose to either be a pawn or we can stand off to the side and kind of snicker as we're doing today and say, nope, that's a game, and I'm not going to play that game.
Yeah, and the other Pokemon equivalent in the movie industry that fits this perfectly was the last Terminator movie with the Genesis system going online and watching the AI grow up in front of you, going from a child to a teenager to a full grown-up and taking over. And that was the whole thing. Yep. And that's what George sounds like we're talking about with 4096 running things, is just a...
Absolutely.
So if Ganesh represents the head of Pluto and it was put back on to represent the pieces of Saturn, which is the other planet, and Pluto's dead because it's in hell. He's the god of the dead, and he's the judger of the dead, which is Osiris. And his head is in CERN also because it's the in my opinion, it's the casket of Osiris and his head is there. And if the Ganesh can't rule as the sun in hell and he has to be resurrected, think of it this way. Satan is copying God. Jesus is the son of God. Ganesh is the son of Saturn. So Saturn wants to be his son to be resurrected as himself, to connect with him so he can be connected to the body, because the body is the flesh and the flesh is his son, because
It's
the flesh is not of God.
Right,
and that's why
it's the fallen state, and it's the dominion of Lucifer is that he can have control over the flesh. He can't have control over your spirit unless you give him permission to take the mark.
Right.
Right.
And that's transhumanism, is just keep propping up the flesh for as long as they can with downloads and augmentations. The whole thing with capturing the spirit or the soul that we looked at before, them trying to figure out how do you capture the soul so you can transplant it into these things.
I believe that the crescent of Shiva is the ring of Saturn. I know that the Cassini is going to crash in the 22nd ring. There's so many rings of Saturn, it's not possible to know how many they are. But we know that Lucifer was the, what do you call him, Tim? The musical...
Yes, the cherub that was the head of the orchestra, basically. He was the head of the worship service in heaven, basically. And he had the instruments encrusted on, he had them as part of his being, which is very interesting, being a cherub. That's why music was always used by him in the music industry. That was the satanic worship service, was through the music industry. That's why it's so closely connected, music and the occult side of things.
Well, let's add to that. From the physics side of it, we have satellites that have recorded the sounds, the literal sounds coming from the rings of Saturn, and have been played back. And when you listen to them, it sounds like a classical composition. It sounds like a real composition.
Amazing.
Something that perhaps Mozart would put together. It's very pleasant.
Well, I don't think it's a mistake that the record player in the shape of the record looks exactly like the rings of Saturn. I don't think there's any, they look the same, so of course they have to be connected.
Right. Makes sense.
Saturn has rings. Jupiter is Olympian, and he has rings. The Olympians fought against the Titans to rule, and that's what's going to happen again in the end times. Uranus has rings, and Uranus was turned sideways. So Uranus was flipped on its side, and so was Pluto. Pluto was flipped on its side as well. So I thought that was interesting that the son of Saturn was flipped on his side, because Uranus was too, and represents Uranus.
Well, this reconnection could also be a realignment and a repositioning, but I don't think there's a sufficient power to do that. I don't think that's part of God's plan. Going back to sound and music specifically, the detectors within the Large Hadron Collider, when the digital information collected from these collisions in the form of the spin of the particles, the trajectory or direction that they fly off from the point of collision, their mass, their energy, the digital information on the trajectories specifically, the way that the particles travel after the collision, has been translated into digital sound. And again, it sounds very similar to the sounds from the rings of Saturn. They're not too different.
Wow.
In their sounds.
Wow.
So, that kind of makes your head spin a little bit.
They are changing the ring of CERN to 10. Is that right?
Specifically the magnets. The superconducting magnets of the Large Hadron Collider's main ring, where the particles circulate around a 27-kilometer ring, presently are made of niobium and titanium. And they'll be changing over to niobium and tin. And when they do that, they'll move in terms of magnetic lines of force from a present state of 8.3 Tesla, which is 100,000 times stronger than the Earth's own magnetic field. They're going to go from 8.3 Tesla to 20 Tesla when they install these new magnets. That means that they'll be able to confine and concentrate the particles. They'll be able to compact the particles closer together, and they'll be able to have more particles in the stream itself to where you have nearly a solid grouping of particles. Right now they can have particles in bunches. They call them bunches that contain billions of particles. And those bunches are only separated by a time distance of 25 nanoseconds. So they're almost touching one another already. But they're going to be able to pack more particles into bunches and bring the bunches closer together to where they have nearly a solid ring spinning in one direction and a second ring spinning in the opposite direction, all traveling at 99.99% the speed of light. The reason for the increase to 20 Tesla with the niobium and tin superconducting magnets is for the purpose of getting more particles to collide. Now, they will collide when they're running protons, for example, at 45-degree angles. They cross the streams in a detector, and there's 4 principal detectors. When they go lead to lead or lead to proton, ions of lead to protons, they do it in a head-to-head collision, which results in a much larger number of particles colliding and a greater yield of energy. So would you like to talk about energy for a moment?
Sure.
Okay. Remember last year in October, I said that CERN's magnets, the niobium and titanium, had the ability to produce well beyond their present level, and even today, of 13 tera electron volts, that they actually, the magnets were capable of running the machine at 1.5 peta electron volts, a quantum leap. And 3 weeks later, CERN came out and said, oh, yeah, we did. We did momentarily. We had a spike. We had a peak power output of 1.14 peta electron volts. People thought I was crazy to think the machine could jump from 13 tera, from trillions to quadrillions. Well, now you're talking about putting in niobium and tin with 20 Tesla magnetic lines of force, and colliding particles that are even closer together and greater numbers of those particles. So what I am saying is that they are going to go from 1.14 peta electron volts, a peak, momentary peak. They're going to jump from 1 to 20. They're going to go to 20 quadrillion, 20 peta electron volts. Now, that is slated for about 6 years from now. I personally don't think that's part of God's plan. I do not believe all of what I just stated is ever going to come to pass. Part of the reason is there isn't time for that in the timeline of prophecy. The second is they don't need that changeover in the magnets because they just connected a new linear accelerator to the main ring, a straight line accelerator called the Awake experiment, which is 1,000 times more powerful than the 17-mile or 27-kilometer main ring of the LHC. The LHC is providing from one of its beams protons that are pre-accelerated, and picture having a rifle and you open the breech and you insert a bullet, a cartridge. Well, the cartridge are pre-accelerated protons at near the speed of light that are then fed into the breech of this linear accelerator, and then they're further accelerated utilizing what is known as a plasma wake field. These are waves of plasma that are pushing the particles and accelerating them. And as I said, they are accelerating them 1,000 times more energetic than the main collider itself. So they don't need to change over to the magnets. They now have 2 colliders that have combined. And in the timeline that you illustrated today, they're ready. They're already ready. They know the power that they need and they can achieve it. And they have the cryptological key of 4096 to be able to unlock the gateway to the abyss.
Well, we did mention in one of our videos how you did explain over and over that the energy at CERN was way different than what they were presenting.
Yep. And they finally had to come out last year and admit what they did, but they're not even talking about 20 peta electron volts now. They won't even talk about it. They're not even really talking that much about awake being connected to the LHC other than what I just described in that scenario. And that is the scenario. What they certainly will never come out and talk about is when they do connect the two machines, the magnetic lines of force that will be created will form a donut-shaped toroidal field. Now, the ring is a ring for a reason. Picture a donut with a hole in it. In the center of the hole, the center of the main ring of the LHC, is a target area. It's a beam dump area where they send the beams when they're finished with them, or if they have a failure in the machinery. That north field is the center of the ring. Within the center of that ring, they will then direct energy from a wake that is derived pre-accelerated particles from the main ring itself, and that will form a magnetic toroidal field, a donut-shaped field of magnetic lines of force. That in turn will form what is called a torsion field. Picture an aluminum can, and you take the top and bottom in your hands and you twist that can in opposite directions. That's a torsion field. That will then result in the production of the plasma conduit, the Birkeland currents, that will stream from CERN to the southern pole of Saturn in the twisted helix. You have to have the torsion field, the twist, in order to create the twisted lines of charged particles. Looks just like a DNA helix. And that twisted helix will spread from the Earth through the conductive path, the conductive medium, which is called the ether or plasma, and it will travel through that conductive medium to the southern pole of Saturn, as I said. Now, Birkeland currents have been photographed by the Hubble telescope throughout the cosmos, and they're millions of light years in length. So for CERN to do this, it's no big deal. They're just reproducing what already happens in the electric universe.
Well, I think that in the center where you call the north, there's bitumen, and that is described in the Tower of Babel, and that is the store pot, and that is why I think the head of Osiris is in that pot.
So do you think that the head of Osiris is in the fetal target area?
Can you repeat that? Tim, I think we lost him again.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's do a countdown.
I think we touched on a hairy point.
Yeah. My question that I was going to pose was, do you think the head of Osiris is located at the north field target area in the center of the main ring?
I do with all my being, yep. That's just my thoughts, and that's what I believe. But yep.
Well, can you describe again the head of Osiris? You said that it was electromagnetic, it was holographic. Can you describe it again?
The head of Osiris is in the store pot of the Milky Way. It is the Tower of Babel that connects all the planets. If it represents the sun of Saturn and Pluto and in hell and the dead, and it wants to combine with its father, Saturn, that's what they're doing. They're connecting the sun, Osiris's head, with the father of his head. And like you said, 4096, the cryptic key, is what they want to trap everybody in with the consciousness.
Okay. So are we talking about a literal head in a casket?
Yeah.
And therefore, we're talking about reanimating DNA.
I was thinking DNA. I think the concept of the body Gilgamesh, when they went into Iraq and they robbed the tombs there, I thought of them gathering the bodies for the DNA, and the DNA, whatever they did with replicating DNA. We've gone over that before with Kurzweil and the synthesizing DNA stuff. Whether it's literal, the body, or just the DNA worked into the system somehow.
Well, Laban used a head to speak to the other side. He would put a gold coin in his mouth. And also, they cut John the Baptist's head off. And
Yep.
well, I do think that Osiris's head was very well preserved. So I do believe that they do have it. They are using it to connect the Father with the Son. And Apollo is that son. And it is over his grave. And I do believe they want to resurrect him as the Antichrist.
Okay, so let's do a little connecting here. Now, this is new for me. New thoughts. If we take 4096 and we call that a key, and it is a sequence of numbers, prime numbers in a sequence that 4096 represents. Because in coding, you're always working with sequences, patterns, and groupings. If we say that 4096, if you break it down into its prime numbers, then that gives you a sequence of prime numbers in a pattern. Now, hold that thought and go to a parallel line of thought regarding DNA. In DNA, they talk about sequencing and resequencing of DNA. Same thing as a code. So if we look at 4096 and the sequence of the prime numbers as an arrangement of DNA, that you sequence the DNA to a specific pattern, a digital pattern that is defined by those prime numbers, how the prime numbers are arranged in this algorithm of 4096. In other words, where the prime numbers occur in the algorithm, in the streaming of numbers across the page. And then you look parallel to that, side by side, to a strip of DNA and the pattern, the sequence of the DNA, the light squares and the dark squares. You will see the DNA pattern being the same pattern as the pattern of prime numbers in that algorithm of 4096. That pattern of 4096 is telling you the pattern of the DNA that you want to produce using a DNA sequencer. Now, this comes right out of Dr. Craig Ventnor down in La Jolla, California with his Longevity Institute. He's the one who first sequenced human DNA. It was his own DNA that was sequenced. You can take DNA, the construct, the four basic building blocks, and digitally arrange those four building blocks in whatever pattern you want using a DNA sequencer. And from that, once it's sequenced in a pattern, you can then grow that DNA into a biological life form. Now, this has all been done. This is all old news, okay? So I'm not saying anything that's science fiction. What I'm saying is 4096 represents the DNA sequence, the digital coding that they're going to grow a biological entity from. And I think you just identified him by name.
Yes, I believe so. And that is right. I do agree with you that it is all about DNA. And if the computer, which is the quantum computer, can create anything, they can create you in 1 second. It won't be you, but it'll be a flesh you out of DNA. So it is an amazing computer that can it has the ability to do it. They're ready for the Antichrist. They're ready for the new world religion. They're ready for war. They're ready for everything. The new digital currency. Everything is all into place right now.
It's all coalescing. You got it. Now let's go to another scenario that builds upon that discussion. You'll recall that I said that when they open this portal, the interdimensional portal, that they will be able to transmit and receive digitized DNA, sequenced DNA. Now, you and I, the three of us, had that conversation, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago. And that was before I came up with the 4096 and passed it on to you. And I think that now they have the ability, through the Birkeland currents, to transmit that DNA, that sequenced DNA, because here on Earth, they've run experiments. Through the internet, they can transmit the digital code, the sequenced DNA, from the place of origin of that biological sample, that DNA, to another remote location, and using a sequencer to reassemble from that digital code the exact same life form at a remote location. You could then theoretically transmit to a planet your astronauts in the form of sequenced DNA and sending ahead in a small spacecraft the sequencer and the base chemicals that comprise DNA. And you could grow your astronauts on Mars, for example, by using tiny little spaceships. You can do the same thing interdimensionally with sequenced DNA. So there's no reason to think that they can't utilize the Birkeland current, the plasma conduit, I call it, and transmit and receive DNA from Saturn in the form of sequenced DNA. What do you think about that?
It's almost like teleportation again, from the Star Trek style of taking it down to the molecular level and then reassembling it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just blows my mind, actually.
Do you think that they will send something to Saturn, or do you think they're going to receive from Saturn to the Earth?
What I think is Saturn is a computer, and I do think it is connected by Wi-Fi to Earth, but one day it'll be truly connected with the Birkeland currents.
Yeah, I actually think similar lines. I think that Kronos or the computer or the timepieces, they're going to try to break it and then rule here and be outside of time, outside the time dimension. That's the eternal life and no time limit on eternal life. And do as thou wilt, under that philosophy, shall be the whole of the law of the Aleister Crowley type of philosophy that these people want to follow. So yeah, I think it's a transfer of the sequenced DNA to here and then ruling here, and Saturn is no longer really in play as far as the timepiece element, I don't think. I think the timeline ends, and then they're trying to live in the eternal realm where Jesus and God are now, and the other angels are outside the time, that time element.
Okay.
Just to describe the trinity of the Om and the Ganesh in the head, which is Venus and Jupiter and Saturn, the first aspect of Shiva is a direct forward motion. It's the synthesis of spirits in form. The other motion is the spiraling periodical motion, atoms into form, developing consciousness through contact and refinement. And that's Jupiter. And the first one was Venus, Venus representing Shiva, and the crescent and the star. And the third is Saturn, which is Brahma. He represents the active intelligence, adaptability, and he has a rotary motion, the Ouroboros.
Yeah, the rings is where the Ouroboros symbol came from, right?
Yeah. So the circle, the line, and the spiral is the trinity of motion. Saturn, Jupiter, Venus. So that is also equivalent to 4096.
Okay. How is it equivalent to 4096?
The capstone is the cosmic egg, and so is the Ganesh. And he represents 4096, the worship of the cosmic egg. The cosmic egg is all the planets equaling to Saturn. Saturn was the cosmic egg. He wants to be again. But the cosmic egg is now the cube, the pyramid, the 7 planets represented Shiva, wanting to become Saturn once again as the head.
It's interesting, the four or the three motions you describe all are contained within the Large Hadron Collider. The straight line is awake, and also the Birkeland currents. And you said a spiral, correct?
Yes, that's Jupiter.
Okay, the spiral is the toroidal field, that twisted aluminum can shape, so to speak. And then what was the third one? It was like a spiral, but it was rotating.
Uh-huh.
The rotary. Now that would be the main ring itself of the Large Hadron Collider. So again, looking at the spiritual aspects of those planets and what they represent dictated the building of the technology.
Wow. So we have the Ogdode as CERN, which is the resurrected Saturn, all working parts together to combine as one through the toroidal fields from the moon to resurrect the sun, because they have to go through the moon, which is the gate is in between the earth and the moon.
Yeah, and isn't it funny how many people have talked about the theory that the earth or that the moon is an artificial moon?
Yeah, it's made of cheese.
Isn't that where the Nazis live now? They live up there, don't they?
Yeah, they're on the other side. They're on the other side.
Your discussion just made me think of how interesting it was that basically the fallen angels had encoded this information prior to the flood happening into the pillars or whatever you wanted to call it, so that at some technologically advanced time in the future, this whole thing could be deciphered and put back together again. And we're at that point in time.
We are. So give me the planets again, and the straight line, the forward motion, is which planet?
Venus, represented Shiva.
Okay. And give me the spiral?
Jupiter, Vishnu.
Okay. And finally, the rotational is Saturn.
Right, which is
Right.
Brahma. That's why Brahma has four faces.
Okay, so let's take Saturn, and it's just a rotational. We look at the North Pole, the hexagon, and it has rotating clouds. Now, they're contra-rotating. The clouds move in opposite directions. I've maintained that the northern pole of Saturn is a, let's say, quote, naturally occurring synchrotron particle accelerator. It is a Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider was built as a model, as a mimicking of the northern pole of Saturn. And that was done spiritually, because when the LHC was built, they didn't know, they didn't have, at least as far as we know, they didn't have photographic evidence of the northern pole of Saturn being a hexagon and having contra-rotating synchrotron clouds, synchrotron energy. So that fits perfectly. And the hexagonal shape is also reproduced in the detectors within the Large Hadron Collider. They use the hexagon as the cross-section configuration, geometric configuration of the detectors themselves. So all of this works together. It doesn't surprise me. And the southern pole of Saturn is a spiral. And then we've got the Birkeland currents connecting Saturn to the Earth in the form of the straight line. So you've got Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma all working together in the form of the Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah. Thank you. That was in my head.
No, you put it all together beautifully. It amazes me you come up with these nuggets. You know?
I believe it's the trident. Saturn has to come down as the beam and to connect to the three, and they are the trident. That's why the Ganesh wears the trident on the head. The trident is the Birkeland currents.
Yeah, Poseidon's trident.
Yeah, and see, Saturn's sons are Poseidon, which is Neptune. He has rings. His other son which his name is Yam, and his name is Yamm, and his other son is Mot, which is Hades, which is Osiris and the dead. And his other son is Jupiter, which is Osiris resurrected from the dead in the underworld as the king of the gods.
So if you look at Jupiter or at Poseidon's trident, if you picture that trident, and it has 3 prongs: Saturn, Venus, Jupiter.
One of the most important scriptures by one verse in all the Holy Bible. Leviticus chapter number 17 and verse 11. The infallible text says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul." When the Lord Jesus Christ went to the cross of Calvary, he shed his precious life's blood, and there on the tree he died for us. The Bible therefore elevates blood to one of the highest possible places as doctrine throughout the Scripture. From Genesis to the book of Revelation, you can speak no higher than the blood of Christ. There's only one thing that can wash your sins away, and that is the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. Even the Apostle John, Revelation 1:5, said they have loved us and washed us from our sins, hallelujah to God, in his own blood. If you have the blood touch your soul, something's going to change about you. If the blood of God comes upon you, it's going to make you a different individual entirely. Acts chapter number 20, verse 28 says, "To feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood." That Bible therefore tells me that God has blood. Now, what man walked this earth that bled and died on a cross and shed his precious blood for us to be saved? Lord Jesus. So Acts chapter number 20, verse 28 tells me that the Lord Jesus Christ is God. Now, I need to accept that for the Bible for what it says. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 12 says, "Neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us." Hallelujah to God. By his blood and not the blood of another. Colossians 1:20 says, "And having made peace through the blood of his cross, by him to reconcile all things to himself. By him I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven." When I look to the cross, I look to the place where God made peace with man. The problem is, will man make peace with God? 1 John 1:7, "But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus Christ his Son cleanseth us from all sin."